Just waiting for confirmation. Thank you. So once again, good evening and welcome to tonight's Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. Prior to the commencement of the committee meeting, I do have some what we call housekeeping rules to read out in terms of how we manage our IT. So please bear with me while I run through that. Can I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording is being archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? And if a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if sat in the council chamber, or use the remote raise hand function located in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. This will put you in the speaker queue accordingly, and when subsequently invited to address by myself, please then press your activation button in the bottom centre of your screen. Please be patient and be aware that there is a small time lag and you don't need to press the button again. The response of the system isn't instant, but if the button or desk microphone changes to red, then it has responded. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to address by myself, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. And when invited to address by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this isn't possible for any reason, then please just let me know or bring it to the attention of the Democratic Services Officer. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and to get the attention of the Democratic Services Officer. And if any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, then they should let myself or the Democratic Services Officer know. If a remote committee member has a prejudicial interest and is therefore required to withdraw from the meeting, the Democratic Services Officer will place the participant in the virtual waiting room until such time that the interested item has concluded. Please do not close your browser window while in the waiting room, as the Democratic Services Officer will bring you back into the meeting automatically when appropriate. For members attending the meeting in person with a prejudicial interest, they'll be asked to leave the chamber for the duration of the interested item and will be invited back into the room as appropriate. So please could I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, cabinet members, our officers, members of the public, and also to anyone who is watching the live meeting broadcast. We're going to move straight on to the agenda, but before I do that, I can see Councillor Perry, you have your hand up. Did you have a point of order or an issue at this time?
Yes, just very quickly, an email which you may not have seen, Chair, has been circulated to all members of the committee from a resident of Penarth, and apparently there are 3 residents in Penarth who wish to speak today but have been slightly behind the cut-off. Now, obviously I chair a town and community council, and there is scope for the chair of a community council to be lenient on these matters. Is it at all possible for us to facilitate those 3 members speaking briefly on item number 4?
I'll take advice from Democratic Services Officer. Thank you, Councillor Perry.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Perry. I'm advised that I can take those items if I choose to do that. I suppose my question is whether, practically speaking, we're able to bring those members of the public into the meeting. And can I just clarify with you, Councillor Perry, is it the bus services that they want to speak on?
Yeah, that's correct. I think there are 3 residents from Penarth, and obviously Penarth is. I know our previous residents of Penarth. I've used the buses in Penarth, the L308 and 307, so I think it'd be valuable to hear their opinions.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Yeah, thank you. I'm afraid I'm advised that because the members of the public have missed the cut-off point to register their interest to speak, that it's not going to be possible to bring them into the meeting at such short notice. I'm sorry about that, but obviously with IT being the way it is, we do need to be able to know in advance if members of the public want to speak so that we can ensure that we can facilitate that appropriately. So my apologies to those residents. Can I suggest that they write to us with the questions or concerns that they want to raise, and we will make sure that they receive an appropriate response. Thank you. So moving straight into the agenda and beginning with agenda item 1, and apologies for absence. Do we have any, please?
No apologies given before the meeting, Chair, though I am led to believe that Councillor William is running fairly late, so he may join us when he can, Chair.
Thank you. And now on to the minutes of the previous meetings from the 20th of February and the 12th of March. Are members happy with... Oh, I apologise, Councillor Champion, you have your hand up, I believe. Did you want to offer apologies for somebody?
Yes, Chair. Can I give my apologies for Vince, please? Councillor Vince Driscoll.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. So back on to the minutes of the previous meetings from the 20th of February and the 12th of March. Are members happy with those minutes, please? And can I have, if I move the minutes, can I have a seconder? Councillor Champion, I'm not sure if this is a legacy hand or if you're raised your hand to second them. No, your hand is gone. So Councillor Iannucci Williams.
Yeah, happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And so on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I believe we should have a few in relation to agenda item 5 on residential parking permits, but are there any others? And could members declare on that item if need be? Councillor Champion.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, item 5. I reserve my right to speak, but I'll leave the meeting at the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. Any other declarations of interest? No, thank you. Before we go into the main business of the committee this evening, I just want to make everyone aware that because we have a number of public speakers, I'm going to be changing the order of the agenda. So we'll start off as originally planned with agenda item 4 on bus services, and then I'll take the report on water quality before we move on to residential parking permits. So agenda item 4, local bus services in the Vale of Glamorgan. This relates to 2 requests for consideration forms which were received relating to bus services from Councillors Samantha Campbell and Ewan Goodjohn. And before I invite you to speak on those issues, Councillor, I can see we've got some hands up. So Councillor Champion, did you want to come back in? No, your hand has gone down. I'll assume that's a legacy hand. Councillor Perry.
Hi, Chair. Good evening. Yeah, you're probably not aware of what I would like to say later on today, but can I ask that agenda items 4 and agenda item 5 are done in that order due to the link between bus services and parking, and that water quality is entirely different. So I think there's a lot of synergy between those 2 items and a lot of benefit with them being taken together.
Yeah, thank you for the point, Councillor Parry, but I think where the synergies exist, I'm sure you and others will be able to draw them out. And for the sake of our public speakers, I will remain with the adjusted agenda as
Perhaps
I've
we could move
described.
the water to the front. Would that be possible?
Thank you, Councillor Perry. As I've described it, we will stay with the agenda. Thank you. Thank you for the point. It is noted.
Yeah, a bit screwed with that.
So moving on, as I say, to agenda item 4, we received 2 requests for consideration forms relating to bus services from councillors Samantha Campbell and Ewan Goodjohn. So to begin this item, I'm going to invite both councillors to introduce their requests. And after that, I'll invite Kyle Phillips, the Council's Operation Manager for Transport Services, to present the report, which has been prepared in response to those requests for consideration. To make committee members aware, we're joined by a member of the public, Mr. Stephen Cooper, who's joined us in the chamber to address the committee. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Cooper. I'll bring you in at the appropriate time. And as already discussed, you'll be allowed 3 minutes in which to speak. So to begin, can I ask Councillor Ewan Goodjohn to explain his reasons for the request for consideration, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers for taking my request for consideration. I originally put this in September, a good 8 months ago. At that time, Cardiff Bus had just announced its changes to timetables, which had significant cuts to start of day and end of day services, particularly in my ward and in Barry. There was additionally rumours regarding the rural services provided mostly by Adventure Travel, and that was to be significantly cut as well, if not gone. Since there has been significant changes. For example, the budget was adjusted this year to ensure that no cuts were made to bus services in the rural belt, or very few, to save them. That was over £500,000, if I remember rightly. And additionally, a roadmap has been announced by Welsh Government regarding the bus reforms that are coming in 2 years' time, or at least plan to begin rollout. However, 2 years' time is a long way away, and I do think there's still significant scope for this report and any recommendations to come from this committee. I think it's important to note that bus services particularly affects our most vulnerable, young people in particular. As a youth champion, I feel quite strongly about that. And additionally, older people as well, so both sides of the spectrum, and those who are the poorest citizens, they are the ones that have to use bus services the most. So this affects our most vulnerable people, and especially every wellbeing objective that we have, and as part of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act that we are required to focus on: climate, cost of living crisis, transportation as infrastructure is a crucial part of what we do as a council. So therefore, I think an integrated way of providing our public transportation is necessary, and this report is a good way of summarising all of the services that we provide at the moment, the cost of those services, and how we can best improve those services in the future before 2026 rolls around. And as a council, I think this committee will do a good job at scrutinising and finding out what is the best way forward for this council in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goodjohn. And now, Councillor Samantha Campbell, who joins us online, can I invite you to also introduce your request for consideration? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Goodjohn, I put my request in for consideration quite some time ago, when there was rumours going around about Adventure Travel basically pulling their services within the rural Vale. So as far as I'm considered from residents, there is still issues in regards to the new provider taking over the services within the rural Vale. We've still got issues with the Fonmon Road route that hasn't been taken over within Roos. We've still got issues with buses not turning up on time, buses being cancelled, and basically drivers not knowing where they're going. And with the big subsidies that have come through in the budget, basically we need to check that the council's getting the value for money. Because what we don't want to happen is in 4 or 5 months' time, when we're looking at the budget, and as per this report that's come through, we don't know if next year in 2024-25 we're going to have that financial backing to be able to do this again. That, you know, it's going to be financially viable to continue to do this as a council. So basically, we just need to check that what we've done this time is going to be financially viable next year and for the next couple of years to come. So we need to start having these open and frank conversations as a council to see if this is financially viable for us to continue to subsidise our bus services within the rural Vale, to work towards those Project Zero initiatives that we have, and as Councillor Goodjohn said, to support all of our residents moving forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Campbell. And as I explained earlier, Kyle Phillips is here and he's prepared a report in response to those requests. So Kyle, can you give us a summary of the key points? And I believe you've got a short presentation for us, is that right?
Yes, Chair, I have indeed.
Great, over to you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to run through bus services in the Vale of Glamorgan, past, present and future. If we look back to the past, there was the deregulation of bus services in the UK outside of London, and it was applied in 1986 under the 1985 Transport Act, which basically introduced competition into the bus market. However, local authorities were given the power to support specific unprofitable services which were deemed socially necessary or where there was a gap in the market. This would be undertaken by an open tender process, which we've been doing for a number of years. The situation to date with local authorities such as ourselves is monitoring or has been monitoring the overall commercial network being supplied by operators, and then taking a decision on what additionality we can bring to that network. Prior to COVID, we used funding from a council budget of about £470,000, and we also had bus services support grant from Welsh Government, which was roughly £380,000. We also used some minor funding from Section 106, sustainable transport contributions, and this has more specifically been used to fund Greenlinks community transport in the rural areas of the Vale. And over the last few years, that's actually extended out further than just the rural and covers urban areas as well. So with regard to the bus services that we funded in the past, there's a list there in the report, which you'll see, which included services 7, 88, 94, but only in the evenings, 96, only in the evenings, the 100 service, which was only on a Sunday, the 303 service daily, the 304 service only on the evening and weekends and bank holidays, 320 and 321 in their entirety, the B3 service Monday to Saturday, and then the X2 was only funded Monday to Saturday evening and Sundays and bank holidays. COVID's got a lot to explain, and as the pandemic hit previously, there were lockdowns across the country, as we all know. Local bus services were maintained with Welsh Government funding, which in essence was topping up the fare box with the funding they'd lost without passengers. Originally called the Bus Emergency Scheme, then it moved on to the Bus Transition Fund, which patronage did not or has not got back to pre-pandemic levels, and operators were having to consider wide-scale cuts across the network. Therefore, the BES funding was introduced and was later changed to the Bus Transition Fund for the remainder of the 23-24 financial year. At this point, because there was a reduction in funding, we saw the loss of Service 88 and Services 97, 97A were replaced by B1, B2, which were not as frequent services. With the knowledge that BTF was to end on the 31st of March and no further replacement announced, South East Wales regional authorities, including ourselves, work with their local bus operators to identify what services would be cut. And we were looking at mass cuts across the board, including Service 7, 93, 100, 303, 304, 305, 320, 321, B1, B2, and the X2. We all agreed as part of the Welsh local authority area that we would tender all these services to get an understanding of what funding was needed for them to carry on. And that brings us up to the present day. We've tendered all those services mentioned that were going to be withdrawn, and also looked at bringing back the 88 service, and looked at things such as the 304, B1, B2, X2 and 93 in their entirety, because operators were no longer willing to run them commercially. We've also got some existing de minimis contracts that we've kept in place. We've amended a few services to look at running to places like the Barry Dock interchange, which we've now introduced. And there's only a handful of commercial services now operating in the Vale, which include the 92, 94 and 94B, 95 and 96, which are all operated by Cardiff Bus. The additional funding provided by Welsh Government as part of the bus network grant across Wales was in the region of £39 million. And we were fortunate to get just over £2 million of this funding. And just to give you an idea, I'm not sure how well you can see that on the screen, but if you can see that green line with a white inner, that would be our bus network without that additional funding. And it's noticeable that there's nothing between Llantwit and Barry. There's nothing running between Llantwit and Cowbridge, and nothing between Cowbridge up to Ystrad Owen and further afield. If I flick to the next slide, you can obviously see that we've got a lot more coverage. The bus network is as it was and as it is now. But without that £2 million, it wouldn't be looking like that. So with regard to the future, while the funding made available from Welsh Government has been more than welcome, as Councillor Campbell mentioned, we don't know where we're going past March 2025 at the moment, because we haven't been given any indication of what is on the cards. Welsh Government have launched their roadmap to bus reform, which should make bus service, the Wales bus service bill, and make services easier to use, more accessible, more responsive, seamless, faster, provide better value for money and greener. Quite a few of those are already being progressed. In the Vale in particular, we've got the e-displays in a number of bus shelters, and they will be looking at having real-time information soon, which we're working with Transport for Wales on. But the major issue for us is the time lag between 26 and 28 when this bus reform is planned, and the lack of knowing what funding we've got going forward. And that is the end.
Thank you very much, Kyle. And before we move into the debate proper, can I call in our only public speaker for this item, Mr. Stephen Cooper? Mr. Cooper, welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes to speak, and that time will start when you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Stephen Cooper. I'm 72, a retired surveyor. I've lived in the Roost for over 30 years. I can't drive due to glaucoma, and I have mobility issues. I'm here to plead for the reinstatement of the Fonmon Road section of the 304 bus route in Roost, as mentioned by Councillor Campbell. The statistics I quote are taken from the 2021 census. And to state public transport for the public. The reduction in service fails against the Bus Services Wales Bill in relation to the stated aims of making bus services easier to use, accessible and responsive. It fails. Roost is a large village with a population approximately 50% larger than that of Cowbridge. Approximately 800 people, around 12% of the population of Roost, live in the Fonmon Road area. The Fonmon Road route, 3 stops including Fonmon Cross, directly serves this population of 800 people. And I'm not exaggerating these figures. I've excluded Celtic Way, which is around the same distance to the stops on Fontegary Road. The revised bus route via the Coast Road only serves 1 bus stop to the Aberthaw SSI, that's the Aberthaw Nature Reserve. This route is only 0.4 miles shorter and about 1 to 2 minutes in bus travel time than the route that was cut. A significant percentage of the Fonmon Road population is over 60. There are lots of bungalows, if you know the area, in the Aidenfield Way, with a population of 250 people in that area, of which around 50% are over 60. No buses on Fonmon Road disproportionately discriminates against this age group, who are more likely to have mobility issues and not drive. If you walk down Fonmon Road to catch a bus on Fontegary Road, there is a bottleneck at the Fontegary Arms, no footpath either side and regular flooding. There is a detour to the next stop along Fontegary Road, but that takes you through Kenson Close and it's longer and down 3 poorly lit paths. You gave me a bus pass at 60, and then when I needed it, it was taken away from me. The bus service was taken away. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper, for that valuable contribution to our debate this evening. Can I invite committee members? Are there any points that you would like to clarify with Mr. Cooper before we move on? Mr. Cooper?
If I could just say that a copy of this has been given to Gareth so that he can include it in the minutes if you so wish, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. That's really helpful. Councillor Perry, did you have a point of clarification? And just to explain, we'll move into the debate with general questions and comments later on.
Yeah, just a quick question about the bus service being removed. How often did that bus service run, and to which destinations did it link to or not link to that you would like to have gone to or would still like to go to by public transport?
Well, could you press your button? Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
It takes me into Barry, it takes me into Cardiff. That's the route that I would have normally used. Other than that, I wouldn't use it for other reasons. I mean, I use it to go into Cardiff, to go to the hospital in Cardiff. My wife uses it to go to Landock Hospital. We use it for leisure, to go out into Cardiff for the day. And we use it not least because it's environmentally friendly and saves us money on using our car, which my wife has to drive. But also it was convenient. It ticked so many boxes. And I was very, very disturbed and upset to see the service removed. I think it was towards the end of last year, whilst Adventure Travel has still got the franchise. And then that reduction has been replicated in the new contract with First Direct.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Cooper. Are there any other points of clarification from committee members, please? No, so we'll move on. And can I invite any non-committee members? Have you got any comments or questions, please, in relation to the report that Kyle has presented? I don't see. I can see Cabinet member wants to come in. Cabinet member, Councillor Brooks, can I bring you in a few moments? I'm just going to give Kyle the opportunity, if he wants to respond to the points raised by Mr. Cooper, if I may. So if there are no non-committee members that want to speak at this point, Kyle, did you want to respond to the points raised by Mr. Cooper at this stage? Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify with the 304 service, as it was when Adventure Travel ran it, it was run in the daytime as a commercial service. Therefore, it wasn't a contracted service for the council. They were running it as a private operation. They took that leg of the journey off because they were having particular timing issues, and they were trying to find the best operation so they could get into Cardiff and out of Cardiff without having timing penalties. When we agreed that we would tender the services, we agreed we'd tender them as they were commercially, which is why we didn't add that leg back on. Having said that, we are talking to First Cymru about bits that have been lost and what we can do to add back on. So that is going on in the background at the moment.
Thank you, Kyle. Forgive me, Councillor Brooks, for making you wait. We're joined tonight by a Cabinet Member, Councillor Bronwyn Brooks. Did you want to come in and comment at this stage? Thank you, Councillor Brooks.
I did. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening. I mean, buses, I think, since I've become Cabinet Member back in 2022, I think I'm literally living and breathing bus services, because we really are at a crucial stage with what we can offer. I've got firmly committed to our public bus services, and we've done a huge amount of work, and our officers have done a huge amount of work, consistently talking with the Regional Transport Authority, which is, I sit on that side of it. And then also they are continually working with bus operators, other local authorities and the transport authorities to try and maximise the best that we can to keep our services there. It's not easy, and we've had some incredibly difficult decisions and to try and ensure that we keep the best services that we can, which are not ideal, far from it. And, I would not be the one to say everything is rosy within our bus services, because it's not. It's not. However, we are firmly committed, and it's about that reassurance that we will continue to do that work around all of this. And I think taking into account what Mr. Cooper has just said there about that bus service for Farnborough Road, and obviously Kyle's explanation there. I mean, our new retendered services have only been going about sort of 5-6 weeks, if that. And I think there are certainly tweaks that are still ongoing in the background and that we need to look at with the bus operators. And that definitely includes the Farnborough Road service. And it also includes services like the B7, which was serving Landock Hospital, and the issues that have been there around that. And another couple of tweaks as well. And I think going forward, it will probably be worth another look at where we are, maybe in about 6 months' time, if that is something that the committee would be, where it'd be advantageous to have another report and see where we are and what tweaks and what changes we've been able to make. We've got a bit of a difficult time coming up, because obviously there is this the roadmap, that's been issued by Welsh Government. And obviously then around the new bill that's going to come in around the franchising, it's about integrated transport. The whole aim is to actually link it all up: your buses, your trains, your active travel, in whatever form you take that. And obviously then that integrated ticketing as well, where you could just literally move from one form of transport to another with ease and with minimal costs as well. So there's still a lot of work to do around that, and that will keep moving forward. And obviously we will, certainly be around the table with those discussions and for our valuable input as well. And I think a lot more work in collaborative as well with other local authorities will come out of that. And that I see is very much is a future for us. And I suppose another point I'd just like to make is around the supported bus services that we made a conscious decision to put a 0.5% increase it within the council tax, which was ring-fenced then purely for those supported bus services, because we recognise how important and how these are vital lifelines within our communities. And we need to encourage as many people as we can to use our bus services, which is not always easy if they're not reliable and they're not serving the areas that we desperately need. Then we've got to look at that, and it's about trying to make sure. And I think we've all got a responsibility there as local elected members and within our other organisations that we sit on and town and community councils to try and encourage as many people as possible to use those bus services, to try and get it back up to where we were. It is slowly increasing, But it's about that confidence, and I think things around the timetabling, and obviously then our new timetables, our live information, I think is really important for that going forward. So it's about protecting those services. So that is where I am at the moment as the cabinet member. The discussions are continual; they're ongoing, and I do apologise for taking this long to get this the reports actually to committee for the request for consideration. But there have been so many things that we have to deal with, especially around the retendering. What we didn't want to do is to provide a half sort of response. We needed to give it as up to date as possible, but it's still a moving feast, and I think that's really important for the committee to note, and whether it'll be advantageous then to actually have a future report if committee feels that would be advantageous for them. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooks. So before I invite committee members to come in with their questions and comments, if I can just start with a question myself, if I may. I'm not sure if it's for the cabinet member or for you, Kyle, but clearly there are concerns about what will happen if the Bus Network Fund isn't sustained beyond March 2025, given that together with the funding the council has put in, we're significantly reliant upon it for the services as they stand now. So when are we likely to know whether or not that funding is going to be available next year? I don't know who wants to take that. Do you want to take it, Kyle?
I'm happy to jump in. We have regular meetings now as a South East Wales Bus Working Group. We're meeting monthly. We may ramp them up in the next couple of months to start meeting fortnightly, but that group is very much it has Welsh Government on it as well. So we're in constant dialogue. I can't give you an answer at the moment because we just don't know. And unfortunately, the way bus funding has worked, everything has been quite a tight timescale. Hence, we're going out to tender with not much notice. And so I can't answer that today, but we are in regular dialogue. So as soon as we know, we can let others know.
Thank you, Kyle. Any questions or comments from committee members, please? Councillor Hooper, I can see you're on screen, but I think Councillor Prothero has actually put her hand up first. So I'm going to take Councillor Prothero. Oh, no, I beg your pardon. You've jumped ahead of her in the queue. The joys of IT. Councillor Hooper, please go ahead, and then I'll bring you in afterwards, Councillor Prothero. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry I'm not there tonight in the meeting room, which is because it would be important, I think, to hear particularly Mr. Cooper's views on bus service as a user. But just a couple of points I want to make. First, I think there are lots of Mr. Coopers who aren't in the room tonight, whose voices go unheard with regard to buses. Bus services are the Cinderella service when it comes to public transport, not necessarily in this council, but across Wales and across the rest of the UK as well. And I think that's something that needs to be said and clear. And I think that was exemplified by the recent work we did on the replacement local development plan, where we looked at sites that fit around the rail network. But had we a bus network that was particularly planned and well thought through and something that would be there in the future, we could have planned our future developments around a bus service that we knew would be there into the future. But clearly, we can't. A couple of points I'd welcome views on. First thing, Bevan Foundation in 2018 called for free public transport in Wales. They suggested it would be a key important fight in the fight against climate change, but also as a key fight against against poverty across Wales. 2080, we're now in 2024 and we're no further forward. But other places have. Montpellier in France, Dunkirk, Tallinn in Estonia. There's lots of places that are trying free bus travel, and yet, as I said, we're the Cinderella service. Paris has introduced free bus travel for under 18s, especially to try and encourage them. If they need to go further to get jobs, this is a key opportunity for them to do that as well. The last point I just want to make is that this is a strategic failure as well in our local city region area. We've got the metro talking about linkages. It's interesting hearing Councillor Brooks talking about the need for us to link up buses, trains, active travel. And I think the recent opening of the bus interchange close to Barry Docks offices, when for the first number of months at that station no buses turned up, is an indication of a complete strategic failure on behalf of the city region and on behalf of this council. I'd really be interested in people's views on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. I think there are a number of points there. So I will just invite Kyle, if you want to respond to any of those now, and indeed the Cabinet member, if she's still with us, if she wants to make a further comment. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, I'm happy. I think the first one I'll touch on is the Barry Dock interchange. We had earmarked services and had agreement that services would run into the interchange, but unfortunately one of those services was cancelled, as I outlined in my report, the 88. And operators were just very, at the time, because everything was so unstable, they were not willing to change their timetables or operate differently until we got to a point where we knew what the future funding was. That's why now we've got more services running into the interchange. With regard to free fares in other countries, the issue we've got is the loss of revenue the operators have had in the fare box and continue to get with reduced passengers, because ultimately we'd have to pay for the free fare scheme. And again, as I've mentioned with the funding, we don't know where we are, so it's quite difficult for us to do anything with that. And I think that feeds on again with the planning of the reliable bus network. We're not quite where we were in 2018 when we had more commercial services and operators were willing to run those services privately and we're making enough profit to keep them running without any financial input from ourselves or Welsh Government. Unfortunately, we're not in that position at the moment.
Thank you, Kyle. Councillor Prothero, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. It's an interesting debate, this, and I really feel, before I ask my question, I just think we need to reflect that we have a public bus service, but it's actually provided by private companies. So it's not a public nationalised service, which is why we are where we are. And it's why without the monies from this council and the money from Welsh Government, we would be in an even worse state. Because unfortunately, since COVID, we have seen very few people actually taking buses at a time when we need to encourage people to use the bus. And not just people like Mr. Cooper, who unfortunately isn't able to drive anymore. We need people to make that decision and to leave their cars at home. And this is absolutely crucial because of the climate change issues, and we need to reduce pollution. We need to do all sorts of things to try and save us from, I suppose, a rather unfortunate end. So I think what we need to do then is find a way to make using the bus more attractive. So my question really first to Kyle is, what plans do we have as a council to encourage people back to the buses? As councillors, you know, we certainly in the Western Vale, because we rely so much on our 303 bus for everybody. There is just the one bus, and it's necessary that we do get more people onto it. But for all of the buses, at the moment, as I said, it's not a nationalised service. So in order for private companies to keep running them, we need to get more people onto them, and that is crucial. My second question is to do with the areas in the rural Vale that do not now have a service bus, and so rely on Green Links. And I wrote to Green Links myself a couple of weeks ago to ask about what might be happening with the G1 service, which actually has in the past served some of my communities that don't have a regular bus service. I was informed that there are at the moment recruitment issues with volunteer drivers, but there was a campaign coming in the future. So I just wanted to ask that question as well of Kyle, if he can give me any updates on whether we will see the G1 in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Kyle, are you able to pick up those issues? Thank you.
Getting people onto buses is quite a difficult one. We are putting infrastructure in, as I mentioned earlier, with e-displays and trying to make it more attractive for people to use, especially if we have real-time information so people know when the next bus is coming. We are looking at how we have done reduced fare schemes, particularly on the 303 last summer, and we're looking to do something similar again with Section 106 funding. Ultimately, it's with green links as well. I'd say on the boastings, there's a bit of a resource issue. We've struggled to get someone in the green links coordinator post for the past 2 years. As of Friday, fingers crossed, I've just appointed someone, and that person can take the mantle forward. We're looking to get the volunteer recruitment drive out probably next month now when we've got this new person in post. Previously, we've done all types of things such as standing outside Tesco's and Marks and Spencer's trying to highlight that we need more volunteers, so we can look to do that again once I've got that resource in post. So yeah, they're the two answers I'd have for those questions at the minute.
Thank you, Carl. Just picking up on that last issue, I'm conscious that the recent Talk to Us survey, which the Vale undertook with residents, indicated that there are actually lots of residents in the Vale looking for volunteering opportunities. So are we linking with organisations like GVS to publicise those opportunities?
Yes, we are, yes.
I thought you'd say that. I thought I'd double check. Thank you. Councillor Prothero, did you want to come back in?
Other than to say thank you, Kyle, that sounds great. Look forward to seeing the G1 back on the road soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry, please.
Hi again, yeah. And what a world we live in when we rely on volunteers to run essential public services like buses. What a state of the nation. It's a paid job driving a bus. There's a lot of responsibility, and yet we're looking for volunteers to do it, like in the charity sector. I think that's shame on our nation. Absolute shame. And it goes back to Westminster, obviously. It's beyond our control, but shame on them for thinking that people won't work unless they are paid, and you punish people who don't work hard enough, and then you rely on the volunteers to drive your buses for your older people. The ideology in Westminster is broken, clearly broken. Going back to Mark Hooper's point on free public transport, most of the people, as we know, who use the buses in the Vale of Glamorgan are people with free bus transport already. Very few people are younger than myself. They're normally retired with their free bus pass. That has happened. It's a great thing. And perhaps we should really seriously be looking at free public transport for all people, which will reduce dwell times at bus stops, so buses run more to time. And you don't have the collection costs either. And hopefully we continue to pay the bus drivers, because when we're relying on volunteers for libraries and things, that's taking away jobs and causing and contributing towards this cost of living crisis, but it's probably a cost of poor decisions at Westminster crisis. So I would be very much in favour of free public transport. We have a situation where we have car owners making decisions on public transport. So everything that we talk about in terms of buses is for other people to use, and that's why we seem to in Wales have a bias towards public transport for car owners, and we really love park and ride, because these people without cars, they need to get a car to catch the bus, and thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds is being wasted on park and ride because we need to get people to have cars to use buses. And yes, we need to think about how we get people to buses, but it hasn't got to be by car. It can be by walking, it can be by green links, it could be by active travel, as in the bicycle, with secure or even guarded parking. We don't have guarded parking at Barry Island. You know, combine a tourist information centre with guarded parking. Cycle to Barry Island and your bicycle's going to be there when you go home. Have an event somewhere, have guarded parking. That means someone physically there handing out information and guarding those bicycles. Employment. That's the way to get people out of the cost of living crisis. No one's thought about that, have they? Let's just cut spending and put them on the dole. That'll help. So let's look at Culverhouse Cross. We won't talk about the Bury Docks interchange where there are no buses, but we have 3 bus services at Culverhouse Cross. The 96, which goes through Wenvo. We have the C1, which goes across Cardiff, and with the X2. They all pass through that awful roundabout, which could be improved, but no one's thought of it yet. Why don't we join those 3 bus services up? I have a resident in St Nicholas who drives to Wenvo to catch the bus to Canton. Why can't they catch the bus at St Nicholas, change at Culverhouse Cross, and then go directly down to Canton? Not the only one. There are lots of people doing that. There's no point having a free bus service or any bus service if it doesn't go to the right places. And I expect the people who weren't allowed into this meeting were going to tell us about Landock Hospital. I mean, I don't know how to get from here, where I am, to the Heath Hospital. Never mind Landock. It would be, 3 buses, 4 buses, how many hours? Or 15 minutes by car? You're not going to get people to change if you don't have the actual bus services, no matter what the cost. And I believe the cost has gone down for weekly tickets now, so it's much more affordable than it used to be. But even if it was free, I wouldn't use it if I can't get to where I want to go to, or it takes me 3 or 4 hours as opposed to a 15-minute car journey. And I will be talking about the cost and how we can actually fund better bus services when it comes to parking, because there's lots of synergy there. So what I want to say now is really, really broken in half. So we're going to talk about pollution in the middle of talking about transport. Younger people. Yeah, let's talk about younger people. Weekends, they want to go out in Cardiff, or they want to go and visit friends, and perhaps they return home on the Sunday evening bus from a weekend away. They can't get from Cardiff to Barry at the evening or Penarth by public transport. The buses and trains all stop.
Councillor Perry, Councillor Perry, forgive me for interrupting you. Just to remind you that the protocol that we follow is that committee members have about 5 minutes to speak, and you've just gone over that 5 minutes. So if you'd just like to draw your comments to a close, I can bring in other committee members. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, we need to have a complete join-up system. We need to fund it, and we'll talk about funding later on, because the money is there. We shouldn't start saying there's no money. There is money there, but we've got to talk about the services. I've got no bus stop at Sycamore Cross. There's no interchange at Culverhouse Cross. There are no evening buses, no weekend buses. The system doesn't work, and we've got to start planning it here, planning it now, and our focus is wrong.
Thank you, Councillor. Kyla, I'm not sure there were any specific questions in there, but there were some points that it might be helpful for you to clarify. Councillor Perry, I think, made a comment about us relying on volunteers to drive buses. I think it'd be helpful if you could just reiterate what you've already said on that issue. If we could just pick up that issue for clarification, I'd be grateful. Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, no problem, Chair. Previously, the Green Links operation worked really, really well with the volunteer drivers we had. We had a large pool of volunteer drivers, and we served the rural Vale, which culminated in the creation of the G1 service and the G4, where people with concessionary passes could use them. The issue we've got at the moment, because of the lack of volunteers, we can't run what's called a Section 22 service that allows people to use their cards, because we have to run it Monday to Friday and we cannot cancel the service. And because we can't rely on the volunteers at the moment, we're in a catch-22. But as I say, with the recruitment drive and getting some more volunteers on, we can look at reintroducing those services, which were successful, unfortunately, previous to the COVID pandemic.
Thank you, Carl. Really helpful clarification. Councillor Penn, you've had your hand up for some time. Thank you for your patience. Would you like to come in now?
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay, yeah?
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor Penn.
Brilliant. It's a bit disappointing that the 89B has disappeared, and it's difficult for people to get to Landock Hospital from Penarth. Now, it did go there all but round the houses. You can get to Barons Court from Penarth, and you can get from Dinnis to Landock Hospital, but to walk from Barons Court to the hospital is a long walk for some people. It's a bit disappointing that the 89B's gone. A question I was asked to raise, timetable boxes have been installed on the 305 route. Cardiff bus timetables. They do have small print and sometimes a bit too high. We have a responsibility to check readability and a policy on large print. So just making sure that timetables are easily viewed and read. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm conscious also the Cabinet Member, Councillor Brooks, you had your hand up previously. I don't know whether you wanted to come in with any final comments before I just close off this debate. Thank you.
Yeah, it was just a comment really. Councillor Cooper raised about the interchange. Now, just to sort of keep in our minds that the planning and the funding around that interchange actually took an awful long time to deliver, way before the pandemic, which has obviously then impacted on our bus services and about our efforts to increase, to increase and keep our bus services. So it is slowly improving. I don't regret having the interchange there because I think it does give us that unique opportunity to actually join up that integrated bus travel, that I talked about earlier. So I don't regret having the interchange there. We are working towards getting more bus services going in there and using that at the moment, and that I can only see increase going forward as we take as we move forward with that. So it was just about that. Was just my comment around that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. And Kyle, I don't know whether you're able to respond to Councillor Penn's issue about the accessibility of the timetables.
Yeah, there was something else I was going to look to clarify there. I think that query's come into us recently. So we've had staff going out, and I know Cardiff Bus have had their staff going out as well to make sure the timetables are accessible. I just wanted to touch on the point about the 89A and B as well. That was a similar thing with Adventure Travel where the service wasn't running to time. So they made tweaks to the service and we introduced the 305 service. But we are, again, like I said earlier, with Fonmont Cross, we're looking at those areas that have missed out because I know places like the Cowslip, Cogan, Andrew Road no longer have a service. So we are working with the operators to see what we can introduce back into those areas. So it is definitely on the agenda.
Thank you, Kyle. I don't see any further hands, so I don't think anybody else wants to come back in on this issue. And I think we've had a really useful debate on the difficulties, some of the challenges of that residents are facing, and obviously the uncertainty about the future of services in the Vale continues to be a concern. I've picked up what I think are a number of recommendations, which I just want to sense check with committee members. So as the Cabinet members suggested, I think it would be very useful for us to have a further update on bus services, I would suggest in 6 months, because as we've heard, the new routes are just bedding in. There will be a review of some of those routes. I think, Kyle, you said there's opportunity to look at whether or not any of them need to be amended. So it'd be really useful for committee to receive that update. And I would suggest that's in 6 months. My other suggestion in terms of recommendation is that if this isn't already intended, that the next report that comes before this committee in relation to the RDLP also addresses the issue of bus routes in terms of the council's plans for significant housing developments. I would also make that same suggestion in relation to the next report that comes before this committee in relation to the Cardiff Capital City regional deal, because clearly there's going to be an increased focus on regional approaches to public transport, and it would be very helpful, I think, for committee to receive information specifically on where the thinking and the planning is around that from our partners across other local authorities. And Kyle, you've clarified that the issue of accessibility of bus timetables is currently being reviewed. That might be something that the Equalities Forum might also want to consider, because clearly, as Mr. Cooper has so eloquently raised with us this evening, there are significant issues, particularly for those members of the public who, for health and disability reasons, are reliant upon public transport. So I think if the updated report that comes back to us in 6 months can address that issue, and if that's something that the Equalities Forum could look at in the interim, I think that would be helpful. Those are my recommendations. I think I've picked that up from the debate. Can I have a seconder for those recommendations?
Could I ask one more?
You can, Councillor Perry, if I've missed something.
Yeah, could we add connecting homes to hospitals like Landock and the Heath, major hospitals, as they are major places of employment, and of course health for residents. And also, can we look at missing bus stops and bus interchanges? I mentioned Coolfrow's Cross and Sycamore Cross. I'm sure there are more elsewhere in the Vale.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the updated report that will come before us in 6 months, I would hope that that would address the issues that Mr. Cooper and others have raised about gaps in the current timetable and how those are going to be served, particularly, as you said, Councillor Perry, to some of those key destinations like hospitals, which are so critical for our residents to get to. So that can be included in any future update that comes before committee. Thank you. Councillor Prothero?
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the 2 points I was making. Can we recommend that that Carl looks at a summer marketing campaign, Catch the Bus? Because I think that will be really helpful. I know he has said that certainly the 303 will be supporting its residents to use it with a, catch the bus for free for a couple of weeks. But if there's possibility of any other campaigns, I just think we need to go for it and press and market that as much as possible. And then I just would like committee to be kept up to date with the progress with the G1. As he said, he's got a new manager in post. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. So if we pick up the progress with the G1 within the next bus update report that comes to us, and if consideration could be given to a summer marketing campaign to encourage residents back onto the buses across the Vale, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much, committee, and thank you, Mr. Cooper. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the committee meeting, but equally, if you'd like to go and enjoy the rest of your evening, please feel free to leave us. Yeah, you've got a bus to catch. Good. Thank you so much for your contribution this evening, Mr. Cooper. Thank you. And equally, Kyle, thank you very much for your contribution tonight. If you're wanting to stay for the rest of the committee meeting, you're welcome. But if you need to leave, please do. And I could see Councillor Campbell, did you have an additional point that you want to make before I move on to the next agenda item?
Sorry, Chair. It's just a point of order. I know you put in the recommendations about the RLDP. It does actually state in the RLDP that the Vale has good bus links. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you. Forgive me being pedantic, but I don't think that's actually a point of order, because points of order are to do with Council's constitution and the legal process that we follow. Nevertheless, it's a point well made, and we will take that point. And as I've said, recommendation before committee that's been agreed is that we will look at public transport. We will expect that the issue of public transport will be addressed within the next RDLP. Thank you. Councillor Goodjohn, unless you've got an actual point of order, I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next agenda item, and as I said previously, I'm going to take the water quality report first before we look at residential parking permits. So we're moving on to agenda item 6, which is bathing water quality at designated beaches in the Vale of Glamorgan. Members will be aware that 2 beaches in the Vale have received a poor quality bathing water classification, indeed the only 2 beaches in Wales with such a classification. And while the council isn't responsible for bathing water quality, I'm sure members will share my concern and want to understand what steps are being taken to address the issues. The Director for Environment and Housing, Miles Punter, has prepared the report that's before us, which provides us with an overview of the existing issues pertaining to water quality here, and to advise us of the multi-agency arrangements that are being put in place to address bathing water quality. And I'm really pleased to say that in order to answer any queries or any concerns, we're also joined by Mr. David Atelier from Natural Resources Wales and Daniel Humphreys from Welsh Water Dŵr Cymru. And I believe we're also welcoming Mr. Stephen Wilson, who's the Managing Director of Dŵr Cymru, Welsh Water. So thank you for joining us. Those participants will be providing some context around the water quality readings, and they'll also outline the planned improvements. We'll also hear from a member of the public, Mr. Geraint Rees, who joins us online and is speaking as a representative of the Cold Nap Lifeguard Club. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Rees. I'll bring you in at the appropriate time, and you'll have 3 minutes to address committee. So if I can begin this item by handing over to you, Mars, I believe you've got a presentation for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, this report is coming straight to this Scrutiny Committee. Just thought it'd be an interesting point to debate, and also the committee may wish to consider this as an ongoing piece of work, because what we're going to be talking about this evening, they're not quick fixes, so it's not going to be an overnight solution. So firstly, to say how important, and I'm sure all members will support this, our beaches are to us. We have one of the highest concentration of bathing beaches in South East Wales. We have 8 designated bathing beaches now. Just to explain, in order for a beach to be designated, it's an application to Welsh Government, where you have to provide detail about the users of that beach. And over the last few years, we've had Cwm Colhew designated in 2022, and we've most recently had Ogmore by Sea and Watch House Bay designated in 2023. So in terms of the regulation, and colleagues from NRW will speak later, this process is regulated by Natural Resources Wales. They undertake samples of the bathing water quality at the bathing beaches between the 15th of May each year and the 30th of September, and that's the bathing water period. For these 2 beaches that you've already said were designated as poor, they took 20 samples. There's a table in the report that explains that not all our beaches are designated poor, but as you say, unfortunately, we have the only 2 poorly designated beaches in the whole of Wales, and that's out of 109 beaches in total. One thing I will say, though, is the way that the calculation is made, it's over a 4-year period. So we've only got 1 year's data. So if you do get poor results within that 1 year, it sort of skews the results a little bit unfairly. So I think hopefully after my discussion, you'll see that there are some positives to come out of this designation, even though it unfortunately is not a good look for us. So paragraph 1.8 in the report explains the classification system, and there's a footnote within that paragraph that explains how it's calculated. It is quite complicated. I'll perhaps leave it to my NRW colleagues to explain that to you, but it's not straightforward, and it is an average process over the whole bathing period. Paragraph 1.10 explains the roles and responsibilities of Natural Resources Wales. And then paragraph 1.12 explains the role of the council as local authority, and 1.13 the role of Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water as a primary provider of water and wastewater services in Wales. So I'm pleased to see both are here today, and I will point out represented at a very senior level. One of the things that we will benefit from as a council is that we have historically had excellent relations both with NRW and with Dŵr Cymru. I held a public meeting recently with beach users for Watch House Bay. It was well attended, and representatives from NRW and Dŵr Cymru were there. And they've also indicated that they will attend a similar meeting that we got planned for early May, which is for beach users of Ogmore by Sea, just to give some comfort to those users. So certainly our partners are not shying away from any discussions in respect of this point, and I think we all share a common goal of trying to improve matters. So table 1 in 2.3 of the report shows our various beaches and their classifications. So as I say, not all bad. 3 excellent, 2 poor, 2 good, 1 sufficient. So what we'd like to do is to move all those up to an excellent standard if possible. And one of the things I will say is those of you who know about the fact that we had blue flag at Whitmore Bay, it's a requirement of blue flag that we have an excellent water quality. So one of the reasons why we can't apply now for that blue flag at Whitmore Bay is because it's still at good. So it is our ambition to get all those up as high as possible. So turning to the 2 poor beaches now, this relates to samples taken last year. So at Ogmore by Sea, 6 of the 20 samples taken showed elevated levels of bacteria. And at Watchtower Bay, 4 of the 20 samples showed elevated levels of bacteria. And they tended to follow high periods of rainfall. So my colleagues will explain the correlation between rainfall and sewage entering the sea. It's not just from sewage systems, it's also from agriculture and other sources. Particularly in Ogmore, where there's a lot of agriculture onto the river. One of the issues that you have to do as a local authority when you have a beach that's designated as poor is the following season you have to put signs up on that beach. And the signs suggest that people shouldn't bathe. They advise against bathing. We're not banning bathing at these beaches. These signs are up now. We put them up as soon as we could. The requirement is to put them up from May the 15th, but as soon as we had them made, we put them up. And we got this information out to bathers as soon as we could. But it must be said, we're not banning bathing, we are advising against it. And entering the sea, whether it be clean or otherwise, is always at the person's risk who was doing that. 2.12 of the report, which is quite important, explains the role of the regulator in respect of poor water quality beaches. And this is why I think as a poor beach, it means that there's extra resource put into turning this around, because there's a legal requirement for the regulator to do that with partners. So whilst poor is not a good measurement, we accept that, it does mean that action must happen. So that's and we will do that via a partnership arrangement between us, the council, NRW and Dŵr Cymru. So we'll aim to report back to this committee, Chair, possibly at the end of the bathing season, because the samples start again from early May. And as I say, we're also meeting with the beach user groups in Ogmore. We haven't done that yet. We haven't, not that we've been avoiding it, we haven't been able to get a venue before this committee. So we had a venue only decided last week, and we could have had a meeting on Monday, but we didn't want to rush people because it was in the middle of the day. So we're now looking at early May, and we just need to speak to our colleagues to see when they're available. One thing also in the report, and it probably will be mentioned later, 2.19, we have a partnership with NRW on pollution risk forecasting, which is a really innovative arrangement where we will have real-time measurements of water quality, probably commencing in 2025. This will enable us to put this information up on the beach itself and on social media to advise against bathing at specific times. In order to do this, there's a very complicated model that has to be put together about all the water that will enter into the sea at that point. So it's a very expensive project. It's costing in the region of £1 million just for 2 Barry beaches, which is Watch House and Whitmore Bay. But we do hope that when we get that in, it will enable us to provide more real-time accurate information to our beach users. But unfortunately, it's limited to 2 beaches because of the huge cost of the model that's required to do that. So I think, Chair, that's all I've got to say, really, other than to stress that we are intent on working in partnership with our colleagues in NRW and Dŵr Cymru. We have previous history of doing so, and I wish to thank them on the record as well for coming forward whenever I've asked them to basically meet the public in respect of this matter, and I'm sure they'll continue to do so as we take this project forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Miles. And before I bring in any elected members who I know will have lots of questions that they want to ask you, I believe you have a presentation. I'm not sure who's going next. Mr Letelier from Natural Resources Wales. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for everybody, my name is David Letelier. I work for Natural Resources Wales. I'm the head of South Central, which includes, amongst other, the Vale of Glamorgan area, and bathing waters falls under my remit. I've got a short presentation there. Basically, Miles has covered most of the points that are in the presentation, but there's a couple of things I would like to reiterate, and I'll do so now. So in terms of NRW's role, the main role for NRW in terms of bathing waters is to monitor and to classify those bathing waters that have been designated by the Welsh Government. As Miles said, the season runs from the 15th of May to the 30th of September. That's the key sort of time period during which samples are taken by my officers. And those samples are analysed for what are called fecal indicator bacteria. Okay, so basically what they do is they're indicative of human sewage as well as animal feces. That includes cows, sheep, dogs, horses, birds. So that gives you the extent of what we're looking at the moment. It's not just sewage. I think it's an important point. As Miles said, a very important point in this case, the classification is done over a 4-year period. So having 1 year's data does skew the sort of, position a little bit. Next slide, please. You've got this into the report, so I'm not going to say too much on this, just that those two newly designated beaches, Watchhouse Bay and Ogmore by Sea, basically returned a poor status. Next slide, please. So whenever there is a poor status, NRW is and partners are required to carry out certain actions as described by Miles. What I would say here is that it is quite a complex issue that can't be resolved overnight, but what it does do is provide a clear focus for the teams involved in this work. So, for example, from an NRW perspective, moving away from sampling the beach, we do have a role as a regulator, and we do have a role in various guises in terms of land management and what happens on land, which might impact the quality of the bathing waters downstream. So it brings a clear focus as to what we need to do and what we where we have to focus our efforts. But obviously, it's not something that can and will happen overnight. But as Miles said, I would like to reiterate the fact that so far, and there's no signs of changing that, we are working very well together. My teams and Miles's teams are working together very well. I've got really good feedback. So that is a positive that I think, a strength, if you like, in terms of our partnership, as well as our colleagues from Welsh Water being involved in this. Next slide, please. The last two slides are there to illustrate some of the work that's already happening that Miles has already mentioned, but I want to reiterate this project about predicting the bathing water at two of the beaches. So basically, as Miles said, £1 million. It's really innovative, it is novel, and it is groundbreaking. It is expected to be live from 2025. And so far in 2023, 2024, in terms of financial years, the project has accomplished all its milestones. It's on track, both in terms of where the model is at and also in terms of spend. And we are basically in the final year of getting things together. So what this will provide is, as Miles said, an sort of daily, instant sort of advice for bathers as to the quality of the water on any given day, given different circumstances, particularly the weather. If you move to the last slide, this is a sort of illustration of the signs that will be sort of available for users of the beach. So the key message is we are not where we want to be. The two results of poor status is disappointing, and we want to improve on that. The strength, I feel, is in the determination of the partnership, of all the partners involved to actually work together to actually achieve a better status, hopefully excellent in some years to come, so that we can achieve blue flag.
Thank you very much, Mr. L'Italian. Before I bring Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water in, just to clarify for those of us who are particularly Barry residents, so when reference is made to Watch House Bay, what we know it by here in Barry is Watchtower Bay. I had no idea that its official designation was Watch House Bay, but I just want to make sure that anybody listening to this committee being broadcast or subsequently picking it up on the recording understands that we are actually talking about Watchtower Bay, but we will forgive our colleagues for referring to it by its proper name. Thank you. Over to you, Welsh Water. I'm not sure who's actually going to be speaking.
Thank you, Chair. I'll like to speak. If you can put up the presentation. So, yeah, I'm Steve Wilson. I'm the Managing Director for Wastewater Services for Dŵr Cymru. A lot of what I've got here, I'm going to whistle through quite quickly because it overlaps with what Miles has said and what David has said. If we can move on to the next slide. I think it's important just to set a little bit of context here before we zoom down into the areas of the Vale. Welsh Water, 3 million customers. That's about 1.4 million households paying the bill. We've got 36,000 kilometres of sewer, 843 sewage treatment works. If you remember, it's only back in the 90s when there was no coastal sewage treatment around the UK. The cities of Newport, Cardiff, Swansea, all that sewage used to just go out to sea untreated, Barry as well. And customers of Welsh Water are paying for all that investment, which has been put in since the kind of 90s, to get the bathing water quality that we have been seeing so far. And one of the other key stats worth kind of mentioning here is that, we've got 15% of the UK's coastline, and we've got over a third of the UK's blue flag beaches in Wales. This is a success story that working together with regulators, with local authorities, that we've got to this position. However, things are changing. If we could move on to the next slide. Climate change, urban creep, growth and development means that this is not a static situation, and things are changing. And actually, the bathing season we've just gone through was one of the wettest in a number of years. If we cast our minds back, it feels like it has been raining constantly actually since July. That meant that the bathing season for 2023, July, August and September were particularly wet months. And historically, we have seen really good performance in drier periods, poorer performance in wetter periods, because our drainage network in Wales, in the UK, in our urban areas, particularly around Barry, etc., is combined. It collects all the rainwater as well as collecting the foul sewage. And when that capacity is full, storm overflows operate. And in the discourse of the UK at the moment, the issue of storm overflows, water company performance is top of the agenda, and we are no different to that. We have to invest in improving those kind of assets at a pace that our customers can afford. There is no other money coming for these upgrades from anywhere other source than our customers and bill payers. We have a number of regulators. Clearly, from an environmental point of view, NRW are key, but we have an economic regulator in Ofwat. And every 5 years, we set an investment period, an investment programme, which our economic regulator has to agree, because that involves bills going up. And clearly, as a monopoly service provider, there needs to be some kind of regulation. Clearly, as a not-for-profit company, we like to think that we are striking the right balance all the time between affordability of bills for customers, Wales is not a very rich nation. We're in an affordability crisis. Striking the right balance of making your water bill affordable, but also delivering good service improvements is one of those things that we wrestle with every day. But we also have an economic regulator which will set the bills for the next 5-year period. So for us, that's the period 2025 to 2030. And we have investment in our plans for improving the bathing waters in Barry particularly. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So I've mentioned about storm overflows. We are planning a huge investment programme, over 4 times bigger than we've done in this last 5-year period, to tackle the issue of storm overflows, to manage climate change, and to try and tackle river water quality, all issues which impact in Wales. All of this is subject to Ofwat's approval of this investment, and we will find out by December of this year whether those investment plans have been improved. Nonetheless, we are not sitting back and waiting. We are working closely now with our partners in the investigations into these kind of areas, and I'm going to touch a little bit later on about the warning system and our storm overflow map, which we are making available to the public as well, to help inform people about when storm overflows might be operating, so they can make more informed decisions about whether they want to choose to go swimming at that time or not. If we can move on to the next slide, please. If I focus now down onto the particular water bodies that have failed this year, that are down at Poor. Barry is a complex catchment. There's a lot of, most of the sewer network is combined. A huge amount of storm water comes down to the pumping stations down at the waterfront here, and then that sewage is then pumped back up to our treatment works at Cogmoors, where things are treated there. We also have one of the only storm UV plants where we disinfect storm water there in the UK to try and protect that bathing water. But what we are seeing is, with urban creep, more people tarmacking front gardens to park cars, putting down plastic astroturf, which doesn't sort of soak any water up, putting patios down. We're seeing more and more impermeable area going down, and we're seeing rainfall get more intense, and we're seeing storm overflows operating more frequently. Our plan in Barry is to start to look at surface water removal, and we're focusing in on a big surface water removal system where we'll take it out of the sewer network so it is uncontaminated by sewage, keeping that in the environment that way, and reducing the need then for bigger and bigger pipes to tackle that. The situation at Ogmore is slightly different in that the beach at Ogmore is dominated by the main sewage treatment works at Penabont, which treats the sewage for Bridgend. Again, that has UV disinfection on it, and it has a large number of storm tanks. But actually what we've seen over the last year or so is the frequency of those storm tanks operating has gone up over the level that we would like to see. When we design our systems, which we know impact on bathing waters, we are looking for no more than 3 storm spills in a bathing season. And we have set triggers with Natural Resources Wales on those sites where they are designed to treat bathing water, that if we go over 5 spills in a bathing season, we have to inform our regulator and we have to come up with an action plan to sort that out. And that's exactly what we're doing at the moment. We have already started the work to look at what we can do to improve stormwater storage and capacity at our Penabont treatment works. If we can move on, please, to the next slide. This is the storm overflow map, which we have put on our website, and now on a real-time basis. So within an hour of a storm overflow operating, you can receive a warning of whether that is in operation or not. The beaches which we've chosen, or the areas that we've chosen to start this process off from January this year, was selected by a survey we did of swimming groups. So you can also see, the eagle-eyed of you will spot it, well, there's some of those inland, but actually they're not by a beach. That's river sources where people are swimming. So we've gone out and said, tell us where you're swimming, whether it's a designated beach or not. tell us which rivers you're swimming in, and therefore we can start to put warnings on for those kind of assets. And this is available on our website. You can zoom in. We are looking at a service whereby we will send automatic messages to beach managers. So that'll be the local authority here for the beaches in the Barry area, so that we can work collectively together on informing people with those kind of warnings. And over this next year, all of our storm overflows, all 2,300 that are across our operating area, will go to a real-time warning system, because increasingly people want to know the water quality of all their rivers and all their water courses. So that is a process which we are driving through this year. If we can move on, please. So I just want to reiterate that absolutely we want to work collectively with the authority, with NRW. As I said, we have a good track record of improving bathing water quality. It is not an overnight issue. When you're going to invest in sewer networks, put in larger pipes, put in more storm storage, those can be 18-month, 2-year investment activities. Regardless of the investment piece, it's very important that we front up, we educate, we talk to customers about what we're doing. We've had a number of drop-in sessions, and we'll continue to work with Miles and his team, and we'll be at more, so that we can get more people to understand both what the warnings are, but also what they can do to help this situation, because the management of storm water and rainwater is not just a water company issue. As you'll know, as a local authority, you've got lots of culverts, you've got lots of highway drains. We're only going to solve this by working together. And actually our customers can help by actually looking at what's happening with the water on their own properties. Is that running off straight away into the street, or actually have they got green space that can soak that up? Can we use water butts to actually slow the flow down in those summer storms, when actually, you know, we want to be using and accessing the beach, but you get a sudden summer thunderstorm which can impact bathing water quality. There are situations that we all do to kind of help that. And the final point is about stop the block. You hear quite a lot about spills from storm overflows in dry weather. The biggest cause of that is blockages of the sewer network still. The dreaded plastic containing wet wipe is still plaguing our rivers, beaches from a pollution point of view. And we're continuing to campaign to see plastic containing wet wipes be banned, but also help educate people about the right place to put that is in the bin, and not down the drain and not down the toilet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. So before we go into the debate proper, please can I call in our public speaker to this item, Mr. Geraint Rees. Mr. Rees, I hope you're still online with us, and I'd like to welcome you to the committee and just remind you that you have 3 minutes to address committee, and that time will start when you start speaking. So are you with us, Mr. Rees? Not with us at the moment. I'm going to carry on. So we're just going to contact Mr. Rees, because we think he might be having some difficulties connecting into the meeting. So I'm going to suggest that we move on in terms of our discussion, and when Mr. Rees is able to join us, I'm going to stop us at the earliest opportunity so that we can bring him in without any further delay. And before I take comments from committee members, are there any non-committee members who want to speak on this issue, please? And if so, please raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised. I was just about to, you read my mind, Councillor Wilson, because I was just about to say the responsible cabinet member I can see has joined committee, and I'm sure that he'll have some comments and possibly questions that he wants to raise. So please go ahead, Councillor Wilson. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentations. You know, water management is a very complicated matter, and as you rightly said, it involves lots of agencies, including the local authority, and which I am partly responsible for. And obviously, even in that area, it is very, very complicated. And as you rightly say, Welsh Water took over a lot of the combined sewers, surface and foul together, and that is a real challenge because to manage them is somewhat problematic. And as you rightly said, since July this year, we've had a huge amount of rainfall, and that does cause pressures on the system. But I think it's also relevant, what I said, of course, is that it's incumbent upon ourselves as residents of the Vale of Glamorgan that we looked at how we manage our own environment. And I think the use of hard standing is one of the case in point, because hard standing does contribute to more water runoff into those networks. And really, if people could put down more grass areas so that the water permeates into the ground at a lot slower rate, and this is often known as the soakaway, I think that'd be very important, and I think I'm very keen to publicise that. And obviously, that's something that we all need to do. And I think, again, the use of, you know, the water conveniences, the water closets as well is also important. You know, as one of the members said, you know, one of the officers said, actually, you know, you shouldn't put wet wipes down the toilet. That causes real problems. I know in places like London, it's a huge, huge problem for Thames Water, but necessarily it's still a problem elsewhere because we can't have those things down in our sewers because it causes real issues. So people need to put it in the black bags because obviously we can't recycle those kind of materials because they're complex. But clearly, you know, this is something that, you know, the public needs to remember what to use and when it's appropriate and how to use it, and also trying to reduce the amount of things like that cause problems. And what I like to reassure the public who are listening in, and also fellow councillors here, is that, you know, this is very much a partnership. We are doing works to try and reduce the impact of flooding in the entire Vale of Glamorgan. That obviously has an issue concerning what we're discussing today. You know, I know I'm going to visit to one of the treatment plants in the not too distant future. And obviously I'm looking forward to that, to see the actual works in place. And I'm hugely impressed by the amount of investment that Welsh Water are doing. And I'm hugely impressed with the amount of monitoring that NRW are doing. So, you know, really, you know, this is obviously a serious issue with the water issue down in Ogmore and in Watchtower Bay. But nevertheless, I feel that, you know, we will make progress on this. And I'm really impressed by the monitoring equipment that we're putting in those two places. And I hope we can put in more monitoring equipment elsewhere so people feel safe when they're going swimming in those areas. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And I'm pleased to say that Mr. Geraint Rees, I believe, has now been able to join us.
He's not quite with us,
Oh.
Chair, but
We sent the link.
We've sent the link, so we're almost there. Can I then, do we think we're going to bring him in imminently? If so, I'm going to... I'm afraid not. No? Okay, all right. Well, we'll carry on with the debate. And I'll ask committee members whether they've got any questions or comments that they want to make. And Councillor William, you're in the chamber and you've indicated that you'd like to speak on this issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Before I speak, there was just one question I had to ask regarding the slide itself from Welsh Water. Something caught my eye. It was the slide before the one about sharing data on storm overflows. Because right at the bottom it had a reference to Penarth and then in brackets Jackson's Bay. So I didn't quite understand the significance of that, because obviously Jackson's Bay is Barry Island, and this was a point all about Penarth. So I was just seeking clarification on that before I made any other comments, Chair.
Yes, I spotted that as well. Are you able to really clarify that? Thank you.
Yeah, hi there, thank you. Dan Humphreys speaking. Yeah, kind of we do a lot of modelling for the area, kind of bringing about a lot of information. And source apportionment is one of the key factors of that. We want to know what key areas, and not just in the Barry area, a much wider area, where kind of we have assets and where we believe kind of they could potentially impact which bathing waters. Because of the tidal elements and all of that that's taken into account, they found the certain assets over in Brockhill Rise, which is to the west side of Penarth, kind of comes over, but obviously kind of the way any discharges may do would be to come over and come towards Jackson's Bay. Therefore, that's why we've put some key investment into that particular area to try and maintain and try and improve the quality of the bathing waters down at Jackson's Bay. So it's a collective, it's a multi-amp approach that we're looking at doing in terms of investment. We don't believe, you know, Steve mentioned investment cycles of how we're kind of funded. We appreciate it's not just going to be a 1 5-year cycle of investment that's going to resolve issues in one particular area such as Barry. So we need to continually invest kind of, you know, each cycle, year on year, each 5-year period on 5-year period. So that's the reason why that mentioned Penarth. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, just one moment.
Of course.
He was with us and we've lost him again. We're going to keep trying. We want to make sure that members of the public who want to speak at committee are given that opportunity. So forgive me for interrupting you. Councillor William, did you want to ask any additional questions? Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I fear that I know there's that saying there are no stupid questions. I might be the exception that proves the rule. So just to clarify, from what you're saying, you're able to tell pretty much where pollutant comes from that affects another area. So, for example, Jackson's Bay, you've been able to sort of say, well, yeah, it's satisfactory because it's not excellent because actually there's stuff coming from this area of Penarth, Brockhill Rise, that is lowering the quality, as it were. In the same way that you can tell that rivers are affecting, for example, Watchtower Bay and the other beach that was designated as poor. You're actually able to tell where it's coming from, and therefore you can address that issue. Is that right?
Yes, if I can answer that. So we've got a number of coastal models which actually understand where the currents go, where load can move around within these kind of waters. And because historically, you know, we've worked a long time with the Vale of Glamorgan around Jackson's Bay, Whitmore Bay, they've been designated for many, many years. Our coastal modelling in that kind of area is quite strong. Unfortunately, it doesn't cover every area. And as new bathing waters get designated, quite often we've got to go and build a new coastal model to work out what's going on. So that's sometimes why there's a bit of a lag. But that's why we understand quite well what's going on in Jackson's Bay and Whitmore, because we've been at this for some time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Rees. Every time I think we're there, we're losing him.
If he joins to
We're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. Thank you. So, Councillor Prothero, committee member, did you want to come in on this issue, Councillor Prothero? Oh, I'm going to stop you. Mr. Rees is with us. Sorry, Councillor Prothero, forgive me. We're going to bring in Mr. Rees, if you'd like to come on screen. I want to make sure we hear from you.
So, Mr. Rees, we can see that you're connected. Could you press the large activation button in the bottom centre of your screen, please? I'm sorry, Chair, he's lost connection again, so I think we'll have to continue.
I think it's proving difficult, isn't it? Councillor Prothero, forgive me for sending you away. Please do come in on this issue.
Absolutely fine. It's just technology, isn't it? So just for the benefit of Steve and Dan from Welsh Water, Dav, we've already met. So my ward is the ward that covers Ogmore by Sea. So the poor quality water rating is something that many residents and groups have come to me and have questions for me to put to you today. So I don't know, Chair, how you want me to do this, because I don't want to suddenly inundate with all these questions. So I'm wondering if I just start with a couple for Dŵr Cymru, if that's okay, and then we'll move on to NRW.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this one has come from a surfing resident, and they're asking questions really to do with whether or not Welsh Water, and if not, why not, are not required to post on their website every time they discharge untreated sewage into the river. That was their first question. And also they want to know what Dŵr Cymru are doing now, so not what they plan to do to improve water quality and stop the discharges. And I think you might have covered some of that with what you've already told us, but if you could address those two issues for my resident.
Who wants to pick those up, Mr. Wilson? Thank you.
No, fine. I'll take that. So, in terms of discharges of sewage from the sewer network, we have these event and duration monitors now on all 2,300 storm overflows. Well, actually 99.97. I think I've got about 15 I haven't yet quite managed to do. But in the area of Ogmore, we've got good coverage. We are trying to get those all on a 1 hour reporting basis, and they're available on our website. We have shared links to that page with a number of swimming groups. I only met a week or so ago with the Blue Tits swimming groups, been sharing that kind of data with them. So we would advise, and if you can publicise, please, go onto Welsh Water's website, look for the storm overflow map. They'll be able to see whether any discharges are operating within the hour. The second point about what are we doing to improve things? Well, as David mentioned, the Ogmore beach is very much impacted by the River Ogmore, and there are lots of sources of pollution which come down that river. Clearly, the sewage treatment works at Penabont is very close. It's very large. It's there to serve all the residents of Bridgend and Porthcawl, so it has a very large population equivalent. It has UV disinfection on its discharge. But the stormwater management there is an area we are focusing on. But as you go upstream into the Ogmore catchment, there are 16 other storm overflows in that catchment. There are also a lot of livestock in that catchment. And on high tides, anybody who's been down there can see that the kind of grazing land, which is around the Ogmore estuary, also fills up with rainwater and then with water and then flows down onto the beach. So it's our job now, working with Natural Resources Wales, to continue the investigation of where the sources of pollution onto that beach, where the sources of the bacteria which will cause the beach to fail are coming from, and that's what we're working on doing. So taking action now at the Penabont sewage treatment works, investigating the source apportionment, the amount of impact from those other storm overflows in the catchment, and then working with NRW on are there any other kind of sources, misconnections, septic tanks, private discharges from caravan parks, etc. All of these things are factors in understanding the bathing water quality.
Thank you. Can I just clarify a point there, Mr. Wilson? So is the situation at the moment that you don't know what the source of the pollution is?
Categorically, no, we don't know. However, as an experienced operator of wastewater treatment works, the fact that the storm tanks at Penabont sewage treatment works discharged during those wet periods when the samples failed, I would say that they are highly likely to be the source. Hence why we are already starting that work on how can we install extra storm storage. This is millions of pounds worth of investment. We're talking enormous concrete structures that will need to be built or put in place. That's why we've started that piece of work now, to understand that. We want to get back out. The way we try to operate our assets, which we know have impact on bathing waters, is that, as I said, the design standard in Europe and the UK is no more than 3 discharges in a bathing season. And that's what we've got to try to get down to for those assets which we know impact. As you go up the catchment, right up through Bridgend, to the higher reaches, there are storm overflows in those areas, but we do not yet understand the amount of impact they will have down a very large river catchment, and that's where we have still got some more investigation work to do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to bring Councillor Prothero back in, but just forgive me, one follow-up question to that. So if you don't currently know the source of the pollution, based on, clearly the expertise and experience that you have, when do you think you might know?
So an investigation into these bathing waters involves quite a bit of sampling. We'll have to do some sampling through the year alongside NRW colleagues. We'll need to build some hydraulic models of the catchment, and that's a very large catchment for us to build drainage models of. As I said, all the wastewater from as far away as Porthcawl, Bridgend, Pencoed, those kind of areas all go to that treatment works. And so we need to do quite a bit of work to understand where the water's coming from, where we can intercept it, where we can do things. So I think we're talking about a 2-3 year exercise here. Rather than just doing nothing and doing that exercise, that's why I want to try and do some improvements now. And I think the storm tank work is something that we have kicked off in advance of any investment programme. I talked about the 5-year investment cycle. I'm not waiting for 2025. We're starting that piece of work, designing and seeing what the art of the possible is, so that we can move quicker, because we want this bathing water to improve its classification and move up towards excellent as quick as we can. As David mentioned, normally Miles mentioned, normally bathing water is sampled over a 4-year period. For any new designation, that's quite tricky. You've only got 1 year's worth of data. And so from an averaging point of view, each year goes by, and let's just hope we have a dry summer. We could all do with a bit of dry weather. Then actually that will help improve things as well, and also help us to try and investigate as well, more in the catchment. When all the pipes are full, it's quite hard sometimes to be able to see the wood for the trees. And so we need to understand dry weather, wet weather, what goes on in that catchment, and it will take us a couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Councillor Prothero, did you want to come back in? I think you said you had some questions for Natural Resources Wales. Or do you have any further questions for Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water as well? Councillor Prothero, we can't actually see you at the moment on screen. There you are.
Am I back?
You're back.
Can you? I'm back in the room.
Yes,
Marvellous.
you are.
Thank you. Yeah, so we had 6 incidents of overflows, and we need to bear in mind that the beach at Ogmore, although it's just become a designated bathing beach, it isn't a new bathing beach. It's a very popular, in fact, it is the popular surfing beach, used all year round, and we see thousands of people in the summer. Nothing is necessarily going to change, because we've put signs up advising people that the water isn't safe to swim in. So the issue I think that we've got, and I've got questions for NRW here from Penabont Lifeguards and also our Beach Academy Wales, who take hundreds of children. The nippers in Penabont actually support the RLNI outside of their hours during the summer periods. Penabont really needs to understand how this is going to impact on what they do. They need to understand where you are doing the testing, because if you are testing anywhere near the mouth of the river, which is river water, not seawater, that is also not a designated bathing area. It's already been red flagged. It is way over to the left of the beach where any swimming would be permitted. We need to know that the testing is being done in these areas, not anywhere near the river. So that's partly their question. Beach Academy Wales, they've asked, do we need to be worried about the children using the intertidal rock pools with the projects that they're running? And I think generally we need to understand how we actually look after the visitors to the beach for the next summer. And while you do what you need to do to improve all of this, how this is going to work. So yes, if you could answer any of those questions, I'd be really grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Can I add to one of Councillor Prothero's questions in relation to where you're doing this sampling? Because obviously, if we think, for example, about a beach like Barry Island, we'll have red flags and we'll recommend that swimmers swim within those red flag areas. And obviously, that's our primary concern, that residents and visitors that are swimming in that area, that's where the testing is happening. So if you could clarify where you're testing and why you're testing in those areas, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will have to get back to you on the exact location. I was unable to bring a technical specialist with me today. What I can say, though, is that the testing, the samples and the protocol that were followed for those samples throughout last season passed the test. None of the samples were failed in terms of how they were taken and the location. So I can't give you the location, but from my perspective and the perspective of how the bathing waters is actually sort of measured, if you like, the quality of the water, that passed the test. So yeah, from my perspective, I don't have an issue with it, but I can give some more information outside of this meeting to the committee. In terms of how safe it is to use rock pools, I don't know, and perhaps I can bring in Miles here in terms of making sure that the beach is actually safe to the users wherever they are, whether they're swimmers or on the rocks.
Thank you, Mr. Letellier. Before I bring Miles in on that last issue, so thank you for that offer. I think committee would very much welcome more information on where the sampling is being done and what the criteria is. And I guess from our perspective, as I've said, the focus for us and for local residents will be that sampling is reflective of where most people are actually swimming and enjoying our local water. So I hope that's within the criteria, and we look forward to receiving that additional information. Thank you. Could you respond, Miles, to that specific issue that Councillor Prothero raised?
Yes, Chair, it's not a very satisfactory answer. I understand this point, but we would always recommend that bathers do so at their own risk. All we've really got is the last sampling data from 2023 currently. As 24 develops, NRW publish the samples taken on their website, and we would encourage people through our website, but we'll link it to NRW's website to look at what the latest samples taken were. But we don't do any sampling ourselves, so all we would do is we would say that you use the beach at your own risk. Maybe some advice on there about swimming after heavy storms, which I think probably is on our website already, because it generally follows when there's a heavy period of rainfall and the quality of the sea is not so good following. We haven't got any other sources really other than NRW sampling, so it would be a case of look at the data that we've got, look at the data NRW has provided, and then make a judgment for yourself. And I know it's not a satisfactory response, but that's all we can say really. Even if the sea was spotlessly clean, it's not without risk entering the sea at any time.
Thank you, Miles. Mr. Wilson, I think you wanted to come back in on this point. Thank you.
Thanks. And clearly, NRW and Miles and his team have that responsibility about water quality. But what I would just also point out is the website sharing app that we've talked about in terms of storm overflows operating. Not only do we put that on our website, but we share that data with Surfers Against Sewage, and anybody who happens to sign up to their Safer Beaches and Seas app will also be getting the same kind of data. And I think it is very difficult to sort of say, is the water safe or not? There are other sources of pollution rather than just sewage. But as a good indication for anybody using the kind of beach, if they were to look at that app and say, has a storm overflow operated in the last 24 hours or so, is a fairly good kind of indication, I would say, at this moment in time about impact. And so, whilst we start to tackle all these storm overflows, which is going to be a very long-term problem, replumbing the whole of the drainage network of Wales, is a big task that's going to take many millions, billions of pounds and many years. At least giving some information about it, when these are operating, is something that should help inform. So what I would say there is, I would advise anybody to have a look at that. They can get that data off our website or from Surfers Against Sewage.
Thank you. And just one point of clarification from me. So in terms of the work that you're going to be doing to address those issues, will the Vale be a priority because of the fact that we have 2 beaches with poor water quality?
So from a Welsh Water investment point of view, as I said, we built into our investment plan what we needed to do to get to maintain excellent and get Whitmore back up to that standard. With the new designations, again, we've got an action plan now around Ogmore and actually the watchtower. The improvements we need to do in Barry in general will improve all 3 beaches in that kind of area. So I'm confident that we've got a good investment plan to turn things around in this area. We are focusing in on the Vale. We absolutely recognise the value to Wales, to our not just the environment, but to our economy in terms of the importance of good quality bathing water. So they are being prioritised in our plan.
Good to hear. Thank you. Councillor Protto, your hand is still up. Can I check if that's a legacy hand or if you wanted to come back in?
If I could just one more question, and I do appreciate I'm taking all the time and I'm really sorry. This is just from me. We do need, and I understand this costs additional money, but the pollution forecasting modelling that's been done on the Barry beaches, which sounds amazing, we need it. We need it in Ogmore. As I said, it's the very popular beach. It at least mitigates our risks. I've written to Hugh Aranka-Davis, myself, the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Rural Affairs. I know that the officers here support that. So really what I'm asking DAV and NRW, will you also lobby Welsh Government to get additional funding so that we can get this pollution forecasting modelling tool on Ogmore Beach as well? Because I think it will really, really benefit, and certainly the thousands of beach-going users. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't lobby. I can certainly give my opinion, though, to key stakeholders. I do think that a tool like this is an excellent tool, not only for us partners who are trying to achieve something, but also for the users, primarily for the users. So I do agree. I want one wherever I can. It's £1 million. At the moment, I would say I want to get the project for Barry completed. I want it to work well. And then if we can expand, then it's definitely something that I'm interested in.
Thank you. I don't know if Councillor Wilson is still with us. I don't know whether Cabinet Member is able to make any comments in relation to that request to talk to Welsh Government. Putting you on the spot, yes. Councillor Wilson.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm absolutely totally supportive, and I know that Councillor Provo has mentioned it to me, and yes, I'm very supportive of that, and I'm happy to lobby Welsh Government on our behalf.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. I know Councillor Prothero and others will be really pleased to hear that. Councillor Hooper, you've had your hand up for a very long time. Thank you for your patience. Would you like to come in on this issue?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentations we've had this evening. I do appreciate it. A couple of things first. Just want to just say to Miles, we really appreciate the comms from the council when this issue first arose. But just a point that when meeting with residents, particularly as one of the beaches in our ward, it would be useful to invite members to those meetings as well. I don't think any members were invited to the meetings with the swimmers in Watchtower Bay, so perhaps we'd be grateful if that could happen in the future. Second thing, I met the team who were doing the work on Whitmore Bay last summer, and not dissimilar to Councillor Prothero, really appreciative of the work that's going on. I think this can make a real difference to the water quality, so just want to give more support to that, and if it can happen elsewhere across the Vale, I'd be appreciative. I'm really concerned, though, that sometimes we don't recognise what the real problem here is that our system is completely and utterly broken. We've taken a model from England, and when they changed the water system, we have private bodies who are responsible. In our case, we have one that's a not-for-profit body, but to all intents and purposes, the way it's funding these services is out of a private body having to find ways of funding it. Executive salaries are not dissimilar between Dura Cymru as they are elsewhere in the country, and we're paying for what is a failure. And the reason I use that term, unlike Councillor Wilson when he said how pleased he was with the work that's going on, you can't be pleased if you're a swimmer who wants to swim regularly in one of those beaches and can't. I think this is a massive disruption. I think swimming in the open sea is something that adds to people's health and well-being and should be supported. If we're going to be serious about this, and I think I'm just going to pick on a point that Councillor Prothero referenced with regard to buses earlier, we need to recognise we've got a public service here that's been delivered by private bodies. This is a public service. Water quality is hugely important. This should be provided by a public body. We shouldn't be grasping for £1 million here and £1 million there, or £1.9 billion here. Water quality is that important. It needs to be done properly. And I think that this is clearly just another indication of a country that doesn't work anymore, because if we can't rely on our waters to be safe, what can we rely on? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Colleagues from Natural Resources Wales and Dura Cymru, I'm absolutely not going to ask you to comment on political matters. If there's anything that you'd like to respond to that Councillor Hooper has said, please do so. And Miles, I don't know if you could respond to the issue around member engagement in terms of dialogue. Thank you.
Chair, I can only apologise for Councillor Hooper and his fellow ward members not receiving an invitation, because it was certainly not my intention for them not to. I was wondering why they weren't there, but that would probably explain it, wouldn't it? So I'll go back and check what went wrong there, and I can only apologise because I had previously met with the local ward members prior to the meeting with the beach users, and it was a natural follow-on then from that meeting. So I can only offer my apologies, and it won't happen again.
Thank you, Miles. Councillor Perry, I can see you've got your hand up, but just to make you aware that Councillor Williams in the chamber actually had his hand up first, so I'm going to bring him first, and then I'm going to come to you. Thank you, Councillor Williams. No, you need to stay where you are because the mic that's sat in front of you is live. Thank you.
Yeah, I feared as much. I just thought it might be easier for the eye line. Thank you for bringing me in. Just that other people in the audience understand, half the designated beaches are in the ward that I represent, along with Councillor Hooper. And whilst I'm pleased to see that you said something very important, excellent is the aim for all the beaches, not just the ones that are poor. So I'm glad to see the work is ongoing to improve the water quality of Jackson's Bay and Whitmore Bay. Monitoring is key to all of this. The question that Councillor Prothero has asked has proved that. Monitoring is key. And I was not only interested but delighted to hear that you can trace and trace the source and track the flow of the pollution. And I assume that the question about sampling at rivers is done because you're not only sampling in the place where people swim, you're also trying to track the source as well by sampling the rivers. So that makes absolutely sense. What I fear is that with the increased sampling you do, you're going to find an answer that may be proving that the pollution is overwhelming, as Councillor Hooper pointed out, that this is raising existential questions about the way we live, and that you may find that as Cogmore's was just overwhelming when the weather became too bad, that we may find the same issue here, that there's actually a massive crisis going on. But I'll move on to my questions. Two questions really. One about coastal erosion and sand loss monitoring. It's something I successfully called for many years ago, and through Clive Moon, the council built up a lot of data about it. What I was wondering was whether that data was being used by yourselves at all, and if not, would it be of any use to you if it were? Because I think the council built up quite a lot of data there, and it might help with ascertaining and understanding water flows and currents. It might not. You're the experts, not me. But I was just thinking there's a source of information there that might not be used by you, and it might be useful. So that was one question. Otherwise, thanks, Miles. Misunderstandings always happen. Don't worry about it. I'll be glad to attend the next meeting. And like you said, it would have been a natural follow-on from the previous meeting that was held. I look forward to attending the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to remind committee members that we actually have coastal erosion. We will have a report on coastal erosion. It's within our forward work plan for this committee, so there will be something coming before us. I don't know whether anybody wants to take that question as to whether or not that data forms any part of the work that you're doing. Mr. Wilson, thank you.
Just to say that I'll go back and take this back to our coastal modelling team, the guys and girls who build those coastal models, to see if that data might be of use. As I said, actually, we've got a pretty good coastal model for Barry, and actually, what that does show is that the things which impact on those beaches can come from quite some distances away. We haven't got the same picture yet around Ogmore, and that's what we need to build quite quickly.
Thank you very much. I think we've had a really good debate. We've spent a lot of time on this issue, quite rightly. I can see Councillor Perry wants to come in, so I think we'll give you the final question, Councillor Perry. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Obviously, it's waste water and these issues. I'll not keep you long. Really, it's just to pick up on the point that Councillor Wilson made over hard standing. And just in my own village, we've got a brand new Vale of Glamorgan built car park with a nice impermeable bitumen surface. So it doesn't appear that the Vale of Glamorgan Council is actually practicing what it's preaching. And perhaps the Welsh Water might want to comment on the Vale of Glamorgan's failure to put in a more permeable surface in the car park rather than sticking to the good old-fashioned slap it down, black bitumen, impermeable drains, and then we'll go away and talk about sustainability and suds. That's really my comment. If Welsh Water want to come in on there, but it's headbanging because we say one thing and then we go away and we do the exact opposite. And I won't mention Welsh Water's roadworks and the grief they cause.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I'm not going to ask Welsh Water to comment on actions that that the council have taken. If Cabinet Member or Miles or yourselves from Welsh Water want to comment on that issue in general, please feel free to do so.
If I can go first, just say actually in Wales, we have a very good framework of planning around sustainable urban drainage. All new builds in Wales have to come with separate systems and using sustainable urban drainage for those kind of services. The local authorities play the role of SAB, which is effectively the SUDS approval body, and our relationship from a planning perspective with the Vale of Glamorgan is an excellent one. I wish it was the same in every one of the 22 local authorities who I have to deal with. But that kind of forethought and thinking about sustainable urban drainage is clear from what we can see. The challenge is more about not new builds, but actually it's the retrofit on existing properties. It's the urban creep around what people are doing on their own property in curtilage, and that's where the biggest impact from extra water getting into the network is coming from.
Thank you. And I can see we have a Cabinet Member would like to make, I think, some final comments, and also the Leader of the Council, Councillor Liz Burnett. But Councillor Wilson, would you like to go next? Thank you.
Yeah, can I thank you? Thanks very much the contributors from NRW and Welsh Water today, because I think they've done a really good job considering the background that we are facing here. Obviously, we are disappointed with those two poor water quality issues in Ogmore and Watchtower Bay. Yes, we are determined to assist and facilitate and help with those two organisations, Welsh Water and Dry Cymru. In terms of the points that were made, I do take these points very seriously. Obviously, we have got Project Zero, which is one of our main movers and shakers, to be honest, in terms of where we're progressing on things. And obviously, we need to act accordingly. But, I think, the point I made about making sure that we have soakaways and is used as much as possible and SUDS is really important going forward, because I'm afraid climate change is not going away. It's very much part of this issue. And hence, I do welcome the investment that Welsh Water are going to be making. That's very, very welcoming. But obviously, it will take time. And obviously, it's very important that we monitor as much as we can and warn people as much as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I can see Councillor Penn, who's a committee member. You've raised your hand. I do want to draw the debate to a close, Councillor Penn, but if there's anything that you want to add, now's your opportunity. And I can see you've taken your hand down. Forgive me, I feel like we've had a really good debate, and I'd like to give the last word to the Executive Leader of the Council, Councillor Liz Burnett, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a point of clarification, actually. It's been a really, really interesting discussion this evening, and I think it's one of those scrutiny committees that I think is worth going back and rewatching for the amount of information that's been discussed. But I do have to say that I am slightly concerned. Some of the comments about impermeable tarmac. Actually, we use permeable tarmac in our schools. I was really pleased to hear the praise of our SUDS initiatives. All our schools have got full SUDS approval. The attenuation ponds that you will find in them are actually a source of biodiversity studies for our children. And in terms of, if I think about Ysgol Bro, for example, the permeable tarmac drains water through into the attenuation pools. And that's how it works, and it actually stops the rainwater from going into the sewers and causing sort of issues like such as flash flooding. So I think we need to be clear of exactly what the facts are when we're discussing such issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Just a final comment to Mr Rees. I'm so sorry he's not been able to join us this evening, but we'll invite Mr Rees to send us his question. And if we may, colleagues from Welsh Water and National Resources Wales, if need be, we'll forward that to you so that you can help us to formulate a response to him, because I know that he was wanting to come and speak to us on behalf of the NAP lifeguards, so he's representing quite a broad group of people. So thank you for that. So just to echo the leader's comments, and thank you very much for joining us for tonight's committee meeting. We're really grateful for the time that you've given us. I hope you can see how concerned we are and how concerned our residents are about the disappointing water quality in two of our beaches. It's been reassuring to hear about the priorities that you're going to be giving to addressing those issues within the Vale. And I think you made the suggestion, Miles, that we have a follow-up report. I'd very much like to request that. It seems to make sense for that to come at the end of the bathing season. I don't know if you'd like to suggest a date. I know you're also waiting for confirmation, Welsh Water, about your funding in December. So perhaps I can just leave you to think about collectively what would be the most helpful date for an update to come back to the committee. Is that all right? Thank you very much. And it's important for me to say, and you won't be surprised to hear me say it, that we are holding you to account on behalf of our residents and all the visitors who enjoy our beaches in the Vale. And so if the solutions are going to take 2 to 3 years before we see the improvements that we want, then we'll be engaging with you through that period. But thank you very much for coming this evening. You're very welcome to stay for our final item on parking permits, but equally, please feel free to go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much. So we go back to the committee's agenda for our final report, which is a report on a review of the council's 2021 residential parking permit schemes. And I said at the beginning of the committee that we do have some members with a prejudicial interest. Councillor William, you were late to committee, so you didn't get an opportunity to declare an interest. Can I ask if you need to declare an interest?
Thank you, Chair. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm declaring a prejudicial interest as I'm in receipt of a residential parking permit, which therefore means I may speak, but I would need to leave the room for any debate or vote that may be taken. So I will want to speak at the beginning, and then I'll leave the room. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor William. Can you remind me, were there any other committee members? Councillor Champion. Yeah. Thank you. Pardon?
Councillor Champion hasn't left quite
No,
yet.
no, fine.
Okay, yeah.
Good. So just to clarify, this is a reference from Cabinet. The report sets out proposed changes to the scheme and is before us tonight for members' consideration, with any recommendations being referred back to Cabinet. Miles, I believe you're also taking us through this report. So over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you say, this is a referral from Cabinet of the 21st of March 2024. So in summary, in the summer of 2021, we introduced residential parking areas at Cosperston, Cowbridge, Barry Island and Nap and Ogmore by Sea. So these were in response to concerns about parking problems in areas where there are public attractions. It followed the COVID lockdowns. There were a few issues with extraneous parking, particularly at places like Cosmeston. So we put in a number of areas, as I say, in 2021, specifically to deal with this public attractions situation. This particular report reviews and, where necessary, proposes amendments to the 2021 residential parking schemes. And this is the first time that this council has used resident parking areas as opposed to lines and signs on the ground. Now, one of the things that's positive about this is it doesn't require a lot of street clutter. So you don't have lots of signs every so many meters, and you don't have lines on the road. One of the negatives of that is it's easy to forget once you've driven past the signs explaining that you're in a parking zone that you're actually in one. And one of the issues we've had very much in one of the areas in Barry Island is that has caused a lot of concern with residents. It should also be said that residential parking schemes, like any other restriction on the highway, should try to be self-policing. So if you decide to infringe the rules associated with that stretch of highway, you should be in the knowledge that you're doing so. So pretty straightforward. If you park on WR lines, people understand the risks of doing so. So you shouldn't have to throw a huge amount of physical on-street enforcement into these areas to ensure that people comply. And one of the things that's in the report is the numbers of fixed penalty notices issued in these areas. And you will see the huge numbers of notices issued in Barry Island as opposed to other areas. And that is primarily because it's not self-policing. And even though we've been to tribunals on a number of occasions and won every one, we're certainly not patting ourselves on the back, because that's not what the scheme is designed to do. I think it has provided a lot of opportunities for residents to park, but there is a downside to that particular scheme. So in terms of the use of residents' parking areas, they tend to work better when there's one way in and one way out. So if you're going into a residential housing estate where you're going in through one entrance, you're coming out through the same, that's when they tend to work best, because it's very visible when you go in. Also, you know you're driving into a housing estate, and we tend to get less infringements in those areas, and Cosmoston is included in that. Where they don't work so well is when there's through roads, and Barry Island is an example of that. Though it has worked better than Barry Island in Ogmore by Sea, where there is a similar through road situation. So the schemes have now been in place for 2.5 years. We've listened to residents. We've also listened to local members. In particular, the Barry Island members have been quite vocal in their concerns about the schemes at Barry Island. As I say, not everything has been negative, but there's some work required in that area in particular. So paragraph 1.11 of the report details the take-up of the permits associated with each area. And paragraph 2.1 to 2.27 explains the success or otherwise of the schemes in each particular area. So I'll just give you a brief summary of what is proposed by the report. So the schemes have generally worked well, with the exceptions of certain areas of Barry Island. No scheme is without its failings. The primary judgment of whether the schemes have worked well or not is the residents that the schemes are there to serve. In particular, Barry Island has affected those that visit, some of whom are local. They're not from outside the area. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail. So in terms of Cowbridge, the scheme extents for Cowbridge is shown at page 20 of the document. And this scheme was put in to primarily deter visitors from parking outside the main car park, which is now chargeable. And it's working reasonably well. And at present, there's no plans to change this particular scheme. But I will say with all these schemes, they're always kept under observation because situations do change. In terms of Cosmoston, this was put in largely as a result of what happened to that estate when Cosmoston car park was closed to visitors due to COVID, and quite a few cars went into the estate to park. So when the car park is open, even though we're charging for it, the evidence is that there's not a great deal of parking across the road in the Cosmoston estate. So we could have a discussion with the residents about whether this particular scheme stays or not. But we are shortly to be putting in automatic number plate recognition parking at Cosmoston. That's hopefully going in before the school summer holidays. That's our plan. So it would be foolish really to mess around with Cosmoston until we got the finalised parking arrangements in for the country park, and then we'll run it for a season and we'll see how it pans out. But Cosmoston is where we've had quite a lot of complaints from residents saying that it's restricting their movement and they're restricting their visitor movement in particular. We've tried where possible to provide additional visitor parking permits for things like coffee mornings and whatever. And if you ask us and you have a legitimate reason for having extra parking permits, we will provide them. But Cosmoston has been a little bit challenging because the problems at Cosmoston were not anywhere near as bad as they were when the scheme was put in and under COVID. As I say, the Barry Island schemes has been the most problematic, and the scheme details for Barry Island are shown at pages 14 to 19. Where the controls are on the entrance to estates or cul-de-sacs, the scheme has generally worked well. As I say, where you drive into somewhere where there's only residential properties beyond the signs, and you see the signs as you walk in, the infringements are much less. It's not, however, working well in Redbring Crescent or Plymouth Road, which are through roads, and those schemes are on pages 16, 17 and 19. So what we propose to do in that area is to redesign these schemes to change them to resident parking bay schemes. So essentially similar to those in the centre of our towns, where you've got lines on the road and every so many metres you've got a sign explaining what those lines mean. With that type of scheme, there's detail within our parking permit policy. We generally only turn over 50 to 75% of the highway surface for the residents and their visitors. So what that means is that there won't be so many residents' opportunities within Barry Island as there are now. So that there is a downside to changing this. But it's a social club within the area of Barry Island. There's also a community centre. There's also other businesses that are suffering as a result of this restrictions. We've tried to help them with visitor permits. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I got no doubt that it is precluding visitors on occasions from going to these areas because it's so difficult for them to park. The car park in the case of the social club is quite far away, so people will probably choose to go elsewhere. So we need to revisit this particular area. So what the report seeks to provide is delegated authority to me and the cabinet member to redesign certain areas of Barry Island, and that would then be subject to public consultation. So if we redesign the parking residential areas of Barry Island, it would be subject to a traffic regulation order advertisement and a 21-day notice. We would also, if we redesigned, speak to the local members and do it in consultation with them. We would also meet the public at Barry Island to talk through, because there's the positives and negatives. So we need to get everyone in the same space to talk through what we're proposing. So it won't happen quickly, unfortunately. We are looking to have a draft design for this before the summer holidays, so we can start consulting on it. But I would think that any changes to this residential area won't be in until the end of this calendar year, because it takes so long. These things take time, and we don't want to make any mistakes when we put a second scheme in. In terms of the NAP is shown at pages 25 and 26. A slight tweak is suggested to this particular arrangement in that we submit another traffic regulation order, again 21-day notice and advertisement, to include Glanhavron in the Moisacoid scheme. Glanhavron is a development of private flats at the end of Moisacoid, and often people who visit those flats wish to park in Moisacoid. So there is sufficient parking in that area to open that scheme up to the flats in Glanhavron. So again, we would be looking to do that by a redesign and an advertisement, which would be a public notice. The controls on Ogmore by Sea have worked reasonably well. There are members on the meeting that may say otherwise. We do need some additional signage there, because there's some signage issues which we're looking at, and also we do need to increase our enforcement in that area. The other thing about the report, Chair, is it alludes to a further report on residential parking generally. I haven't got any information to discuss with this committee at this time, and it would be inappropriate for me to do so. We're working on various proposals for residential parking that would allow us to have more schemes of residential parking. We've got about 100 which have applied to us, who say they would benefit from the scheme. They're not self-funding. Residential parking is not self-funding, and neither should it be. It should control itself by its nature of its design. So there will have to be an injection of funding if we are to progress with putting in additional residential schemes in future. So essentially, this is just for those schemes we put in 2021, a review of the success of them or otherwise, and a suggestion that we tweak the one at the NAP and the one at Barry Island, Chair.
Thank you very much, Miles. Can I invite any members with a prejudicial interest who wish to speak to do so now? Councillor William, please. We're just resolving an issue with Councillor Williams' mic, and then hopefully he'll be able to speak.
Councillor William, have you connected into the meeting on your laptop at all?
Well, can I just suggest while we resolve that, I can see Councillor Champion, who I know has also declared a prejudicial interest, is also waiting to speak. So if it's all right, we're going to bring Councillor Champion in first. Thank you, Councillor Champion.
Yes, I live in Middlegate Court in Cambridge, and my family have, I think we have 3 permits at the moment. The plan that I see within the report, I don't think it actually shows the full representation of the zone. The road that leads into Middlegate Court is actually part of the permit zone, and quite often there's cars parked there, and I mentioned it's a permit holders only, and they don't do very much. I'd be concerned. It doesn't sound like there's ever going to be, but obviously a charge for these parking permits, because it was only put in place because of the charging to the town hall car park. So that's really what I've got to say.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. I don't think, unless I missed it, I don't think there was a question there. And I think you've already said, Miles, that you're not in a position to talk about any further changes to the scheme, or indeed any charging that might arise.
No, Chair. I think it would be inappropriate for me to discuss that. There is a report going to go to Cabinet, which will come to this committee, which deals with that issue of whether there should be payment. The other thing I will say to Councillor Champion is that I will make sure that our enforcement officers are fully aware of the extent of this scheme, and they should be enforcing within the red line. So if that isn't the case now, I apologise, and I will make sure that that is the case in future.
Thank you. Councillor William, I think we've resolved your issue. Would you like to come in now?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Miles. I really welcome the proposals mentioned so far. I look forward to working with you and with residents on this. I think Councillor Hooper will be elaborating further on the island. It'd be inappropriate for me to comment much more, though I would say that the social club on the island, which you mentioned, could do with a lot of help, and I'm really pleased to hear that that it figures in your plans massively. I've got a couple of ideas about sort of marking the area around the club, because there's a road that leads onto Dovrig Street, which is basically backs onto the club itself. That might be an idea. We could mark that for patrons of the club. I'm sure there are other things that we could be thinking of, and I look forward to that. But what I will talk about is the NAP and the White Houses down there. The local ward councillors, of which I'm one, we called down the White Houses over a year ago now, because this was a problem. And although we were very welcome and people were glad to see us and talk to us, the results were inconclusive, it has to be said. What we found was that the biggest problem was at the bottleneck, the entrance to the White Houses. It is something that I feel that maybe we as a council should undertake a review, because what I do know is that the status quo is untenable, because it's a nuisance, and this inconsiderate parking is a nuisance for residents, and although it could be easily resolved by people who are maybe using the area for bathing, just dropping their kit off and parking in the Bronamore car park and actually indulging in some exercise, which is a novel concept, they're not doing that, and they're blocking driveways and they're blocking entrances, which is also a hazard anyway because of emergency vehicles. So I think, although our results were inconclusive, I think it does point to the fact that we do need a solution, and I would strongly suggest that we as a council undertake a review in that particular area. With that, I think, now my comments are over, do I need to retire from the room?
Yes, please, Councillor William.
Okay.
I believe Councillor Champion has already left. Could you ask him to do that? Thank you. And we'll just give you a few moments
Thank
to do
you.
that.
Am I allowed to monitor the meeting from outside?
I'll take advice
as a member of the
from
public.
Democratic Services Officer.
Watch it by YouTube.
Right.
Councillor William,
yeah.
just to confirm that obviously the meeting is live streamed this evening, so it is available on the council's YouTube channel if you want to to watch that once you've left.
Right. I can't just click on this and watch it from.
No, because that would mean that you are connected into the meeting, which you cannot be party to now with your declaration. Okay.
Excuse me. Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, well, thank you and good night.
Thank you, Councillor William. Just wait for Councillor William to leave the chamber and confirmation that Councillor Champion has left. Thank you. Thank you. So back to committee members. Can I ask Councillor Prothero to come in on this issue, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's an additional recommendation, really, for additional signage. And going back to Ogmore by Sea, we have permit parking along Main Road, Ogmore by Sea, but there really is only one sign at the start of the incline to the beach car park, and then the next one is a long way away at the start of Sutton Road. Because of that, and when APNR system in the beach car park is up and running, there will be fewer spaces available for people. And I think, as Miles has already clarified, council don't do this to try and generate income, and they don't want it to be unfair. So I think additional signage along the main road would be a really advantageous thing to look at now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. I'm going to bring in Councillor Hooper next and then give you the opportunity to respond, Miles. So Councillor Hooper, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Miles, for the report. First thing, I just want to echo Councillor Williams' point about Barry Island. I think, as Miles knows, we've been talking to residents for a long time about this, so very supportive of these changes taking place. They are long overdue. I think residents have been talking about this not working for a number of years, so I think the sooner this can come to the fore, the better. One thing I would urge, Miles, is just, and I think you did make reference to this, almost needs to be co-produced. So instead of coming to the residents with these ideas, what do you think of them? I think it would be worthwhile engaging before that with them to get the best solutions for the area. They've got some ideas, which I'm sure are not too far away from where you are. I also want to just reiterate about the White House. I think we do need to come back to the White House on the NAP at some point. So I'd put that as a point of review. It's mentioned in the report. And then a wider point, and Miles will be aware of this, Lakeside and the enforcement around Lakeside. Every summer, this is related to the bathing question we had before, because of the amount of people who now want to swim in Watchtower Bay. They rarely, it seems, want to park, are prepared to park in the car parks that are down the Nap and tend to park along Lakeside, or a number of them do. And I think this is something that should be a real concern, and we need to think about how we enforce this better, because we have had a time when emergency services struggled to get to the Watchtower Bay when there was an emergency incident. So this is something that could come back and cause us real concern. So I'd just like to put the point about enforcement and maybe hear what Miles has got to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. So before I bring in Councillor Perry, Miles, are you able to respond to any of those issues? Thank you.
Yes, yeah. And the reason the White House is in the report is because it's quite specific. It's got issues that the challenges for a while. So that's why it's mentioned. It does need to be reviewed. We know that the residents there suffer from parking at certain times of the day. It does seem to be related to the cold water swimming, as does Lakeside. So we will continue to look at that area and see if we can improve it. We did look at the potential for no stopping, no waiting at any time at Lakeside. So essentially the 2 pips you see on the curb, it's already WR lines. The danger with that is it prevents anyone stopping. So even if you live there and you're stopping to drop your shopping off, the camera car could pick you up. So I think on balance, it probably is not the right thing to do there. But if we have a program of enforcement now through the summer period, and we find that we're still suffering these problems, we're going to have to look at something like that. The danger with that, as I say, it affects the residents you're trying to protect, because it means no one can stop there. It's a lovely clear way, but you've only got to stop there to drop somebody off, and if the camera car catches you, then you'll be fine, because it actually is no stopping. Whereas with WL lines, there's a grace period of 5 minutes if our enforcement officers see you. But we need to do more patrols there. We've done some work with Councillor Hooper, and we have issued some tickets there because people do leave their cars and they go in the sea. So we'll continue with that work, and we'll also look at the White House. And I do accept Councillor Hooper and Councillor Williams' point. This is very much a co-production issue. The local ward members know a lot about the area they're responsible for. They've had lots of conversations with those that live in the space. So we'll put some draft designs down and some principles, and then meet with them first to see if they meet with their expectations, and then we'll meet with the residents. So I don't want to do this again. I want to get it right this next time. We've got a lot of learning. There's no reason why we shouldn't get it absolutely right this next time. But it will be a situation where we won't be doing it to the residents. We will hope they will come with us and be responsible for the new design.
Thank you, Miles. Councillor Perry, please.
Hi, yeah. So I haven't come across this parking before. I've not been out enough recently, but I just had a look in Middlegate Court, and I've seen the signs on Google Street View, and the map is different to what's on Street View. I did also read about questions of visitors, because people do have visitors and they have tradespeople, and parking can be problematic for tradespeople when they need to work on a house and there's no room on the driveway, or their van's too large. The question really here, we did hear that at the start, Miles did say it's not self-funding. Well, why not? Why are we subsidising cars? We can't afford to subsidise bus services. We're relying on volunteer bus drivers, and yet we can find the finances to subsidise private parking on the public highway. It's a public area, it's a public space. It's owned by the Vale of Glamorgan Council. We're selling everything off that we don't really want to sell. Plainfield's got to build, and need the money. We own this piece of bitumen, yeah, and suddenly it's like, oh, we can't charge for that. We'll charge them for good things like playing sport, but we won't charge them for parking a car, because having a car is good. What happened to the climate crisis? What happened to the need to reduce car ownership? We suddenly like, oh, we own cars. We don't want to change things. We've got to keep owning our own cars, and therefore we have to have parking for our own cars. And that is why we're not making any progress. Climate emergency is a climate catastrophe because nothing is changing, because we're all setting. I hate to pay to park. If I can park for free, yes. I've got to do things I dislike. We've all got to do things we dislike because we can't continue the way we're going. I'm not the person parking across the road from Cosmiston yet, but I won't now. Parking charges can go into other services. They can go into car clubs to reduce car ownership. They can go into public transport to reduce car ownership. They can plant trees in streets. Let's not think of it as being bad and evil. Let's think of it as being a source of income. that we can actually do things that people want in their communities. Let's ring fence the money. So let's start charging for permits, and let's charge people to park there as well. Why should it be reserved for just the people who live there? Why don't the visitors pay? People going nearby pay. Let's utilise this. Perhaps I was a bit left-wing earlier, perhaps I'm a bit right-wing now. It's our public land, so let's try and leverage some money from it. Streets have got more valuable purposes than car storage, which is what happens a lot in parts of Penarth and parts of Barry. We're using our streets for car storage. Children can't play. There's no social space left. Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to remember streets with one car, and people used to do things in the streets other than store vehicles that they don't use. Then again, we have to have vehicles because we can't fund evening services on the trains or buses. You could also give discounts on residents parking if they're a vulnerable person with a disability or lower income. So that is possible. But we are forcing people to have cars who can't afford cars because that's what we want them to have. So we're actually got a bit of a cycle here of poverty where you must have a car to a minimum wage because you can't get to work in hospital for your minimum wage. So you've got to have a car, and that makes you poor. So a bit of a cycle going there, which we could break. Why don't we adopt progressive parking fines? Because people make mistakes. Why is the first parking fine the same as the 10th? It becomes VIP parking because some people are billionaires and it's just 30, 40, 50 pound fine. They don't care, they'll just pay it. Whereas for some people, that is really, really, really harsh on their financials. So maybe if someone makes a mistake, the first fine is very low and then you progressively raise it as they make more deliberate parking.
Councillor Parry, forgive me interrupting you. Just to remind you, you only have 5 minutes to speak and you've got about 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's charge the right price for the curb parking. Let's empty our streets, or not empty them, but always be able to turn up and park. If you set the market pricing so that when you turn up, there's always 1 or 2 spaces left, so there's no cruising around to park. Yeah, we're offering too many free parking. I hate parking. We need to make paying for parking easy and convenient. And we need to make sure that when you turn up on Plymouth Street or wherever you're turning up, there's a parking space available because we've set the price right. And the income that we're getting from that provides the alternatives, whether that's a bus service, whether that's active travel infrastructure, and guarded parking for your bicycles, so you know your bicycle's there when you get back. We could reopen the tourism centre, perhaps.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. I'm going to stop you there because your 5 minutes.
It's actually been done in
your 5 minutes is up. Thank you very much.
And New York, apparently.
And I think, Miles, you've already explained that there will be some consideration made of cost recovery and there will be a report coming back to committee. I'm not sure there was anything else that you would want to respond to in relation to Councillor Parry's comments. If not, I'll move on. No, thank you. Councillor Elliott Penn, please. Councillor Penn, are you with us? You need to press your the large request to speak button. Yes, you're with us.
Sorry. Thanks, Miles. Just a logistics question on consultations on resident parking permit schemes. When you do a consultation and you've got the data on the amount of cars in an area, do we have a minimum threshold of responses on a consultation before any scheme is implemented? As quite often, the loudest voices in a community quite often steer these things. And if you don't have a minimum threshold of responses, then a scheme could be implemented on a majority that didn't actually want it, because people tend to respond if they're angry and not if they're just satisfied or indifferent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Penn. Miles, are you able to respond to that point? Thank you.
Chair, yes, we do. I'm just frantically reading the resident control parking policy to establish the actual size of the proportion. But we're talking, I believe, in a region of 70% in an area that has to be wanting the residence parking scheme, so that we're not doing it to you in your street, essentially. So there is a criteria. It's the actual scheme is available on the website. It's quite a detailed policy. So yeah, we will do reviews. It would have to be requested, and then we will speak to everyone in the street to get their opinion. And if we don't get that threshold, it doesn't go ahead.
Thank you. And if I may ask a question before I bring the Cabinet member in, can I just clarify in terms of the review that's being done, Miles? Are there any proposed changes to holders of blue badges in relation to residential parking?
No, Chair. The policy deals with how blue badge holders can park within these residential zones. Providing your badge is showing, you can park for up to 3 hours. And we haven't had, I'm aware of, any issues with blue badge holders in these areas. So we're not proposing to change that because it seems to be working from the fact that I haven't had any negative comments about them.
Thank you for that. Really helpful clarification. And Cabinet member, Councillor Wilson, do you want to comment on these issues? Thank you.
Yeah, and can I thank everyone's contributions, because I think it's been really constructive, especially those members who actually talked about the report, because I think that is really what it's about tonight. I mean, obviously, we got a subsequent report when we're having a review of residential parking permits and the schemes, and that's coming later. But at the moment, we are just looking at these schemes, and I think it's important that we do talk to local members and talk to the residents as much as possible. And I know there's been a high degree of consultation, which is why we're making these suggested changes, especially around Barry Island and Plymouth Road, because I think those are the areas where we've had the most sort of issues with it. And of course, I'm not pleased of collecting massive amount of fines in those areas, because really we want it to be, as Miles rightly said, self-managed. Now, we don't want a scheme where clearly it's not really working. So that's just why we're going to be making those changes. But I will obviously take on board the recommendations that are being made. I know they're not written down recommendations, but the points being made by members today, and I will discuss them with officers, and then we see what we do next. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And that brings me neatly to summarising the debate that we've had on this issue this evening. Thank you, Miles, for taking us through the report. I think it would be very helpful if committee could have an update when the review of the scheme has been finalised, and perhaps you can advise us whether or not 6 months would be an appropriate time, and that following on from members' comments, we would welcome a review of arrangements, specifically in the White House area of the NAP, that consideration be given to additional signage in the main road in Ogmore, that there are additional patrols at the lakeside area to ensure that people are complying with parking arrangements, and as you've already confirmed, that there should be appropriate engagement with affected residents to ensure that this review captures all the issues as far as possible that concerns residents. Thank you. Thank you, committee. I don't know whether Councillor Champion wants to come back in for this last 30 seconds, but I'm going to assume not, because we're actually at the end of the committee. Yes, and he's gone, and that's completely understandable. So that concludes our business for this evening, and also actually for this municipal year. So to all committee members, officers, and all participants, I'd like to thank you for your input and contribution over the last 12 months. And I think it's fair to say as a committee we've had an extremely productive year and have undertaken some very detailed scrutiny over a range of topics and service areas. So all I'm left to do is to say that the next committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 21st of May at the usual time of 6 o'clock. And on that note, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night all.